Civilized vanity. Civilized vanity was a disturbing idea deeply associated with Anacharsis, the ancient Scythian philosopher who warned that a society can look refined, educated, and morally advanced while secretly being ruled by ego, pride, and shallow appearances. One of the creepiest things about human nature is how easily people confuse looking good with being good. A society can build grand cities, create laws, praise intelligence, wear elegant clothing, and speak with polished manners, yet still be empty underneath. Behind the clean surface, people may be driven by status, comparison, admiration, and the desperate fear of being seen as ordinary. This becomes dangerous because vanity rarely announces itself as vanity. It hides behind ambition. It hides behind success. It hides behind morality performed in public so people can be praised for appearing righteous instead of actually becoming honest, humble, or wise. Over time, people stop living and start performing. They shape their personalities for approval. They choose careers to impress strangers. They enter relationships that improve their image. Even kindness can become a performance, not because the heart is generous, but because applause feels good. The darkest part is how normal this becomes. Everyone smiles, dresses well, speaks politely, and pretends the system is healthy, while quietly drowning in insecurity. A vain society teaches people to polish the mask while neglecting the soul. And what Anacharsis saw is still unsettling today. Civilization does not always cure human emptiness. Sometimes it simply decorates it. The most admired people may not be the wisest, but the ones who learned how to look important while hiding how hollow they truly are inside. Inner ruin. Inner ruin was a dark philosophical idea associated with Bias of Priene, one of the ancient Greek seven sages, who believed that most human beings are destroyed less by external enemies and more by the hidden flaws living quietly inside their own minds. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that many people unknowingly carry the seeds of their own destruction everywhere they go. Their downfall is already inside them long before life exposes it. Pride, uncontrolled desire, envy, insecurity, greed, anger, and emotional weakness often remain hidden for years, waiting silently for the right moment to surface. This is what makes inner ruin so disturbing. A person can appear successful, intelligent, attractive, disciplined, or respected while secretly being consumed by impulses they cannot control. From the outside, they look stable. Inside, they are collapsing slowly. Some people sabotage relationships because of jealousy. Others destroy opportunities because their ego cannot handle criticism. Many ruin their future through addictions, arrogance, or emotional impulses they refuse to confront honestly. Bias of Priene understood that the human mind can become its own trap. People often spend their lives blaming bad luck, enemies, society, or betrayal, while ignoring the darker reality that their worst enemy may already exist within them. The terrifying part is that self-destruction rarely feels dangerous at first. It feels pleasurable. It feels justified. It feels comforting. Over time, hidden weaknesses begin shaping choices, habits, and reactions until a person slowly becomes the architect of their own suffering. And by the time many people realize what ruined them, the damage has already quietly consumed large parts of their life forever. Destructive excess. Destructive excess was a dark, philosophical warning associated with Cleobulus, one of the ancient Greek seven sages, who believed that moderation is admired not because humans naturally love balance, but because uncontrolled excess slowly destroys people in ways they often fail to notice until it is too late. One of the creepiest things about human behavior is that destruction rarely arrives suddenly. Most people imagine ruin as a dramatic event, but excess works differently. It enters quietly through pleasure, comfort, obsession, and emotional indulgence. Too much pride weakens judgment. Too much pleasure numbs discipline. Too much ambition consumes peace. Even too much love can become possession and emotional dependence. This is what makes excess so psychologically dangerous. In the beginning, it rarely feels harmful. It feels rewarding. It feels exciting. It gives temporary relief, stimulation, or validation. People become addicted to more attention, more money, more control, more food, more status, more entertainment, or more emotional intensity because the human mind constantly adapts and demands stronger stimulation over time. Cleobulus understood that excess changes people slowly enough that they barely notice the transformation happening inside them. A person may think they are simply enjoying life while secretly becoming emotionally unstable, impatient, impulsive, or spiritually empty. What once felt satisfying eventually becomes necessary just to feel normal. The darkest part is that society often celebrates excess before condemning it. People praise obsession when it produces success, praise pride when it appears confident, and praise indulgence when it looks glamorous. But underneath the surface, imbalance quietly drains the mind, weakens character, and erodes self-control. And by the time many people finally recognize the damage caused by excess, their habits have already reshaped who they are permanently from within. Cosmic insignificance. Cosmic insignificance was a deeply unsettling idea connected to Pherecydes, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed the universe existed long before humanity and operates according to forces far greater, stranger, and more indifferent than human beings are emotionally prepared to accept. One of the creepiest realizations a person can experience is understanding how small human life truly is. Most people live as though the world revolves around human emotions, desires, ambitions, and fears. They assume reality exists in ways that feel familiar, comforting, and understandable. But Pherecydes challenged this comforting illusion by suggesting that existence itself is ancient, mysterious, and not designed around human importance. This idea becomes psychologically terrifying because the human mind desperately wants meaning and control. People want to believe they matter at the center of reality. They want to believe the universe notices their suffering, rewards their goodness, or follows rules that make emotional sense. But the deeper humanity explores existence, the stranger reality appears. Endless space, ancient stars, invisible forces, and the passage of unimaginable time reveal a universe that existed billions of years before human civilization and will likely continue long after humanity disappears. Pherecydes understood that this truth creates deep emotional discomfort. The mind struggles to accept that human beings may not be the main characters of existence, but temporary observers moving through something vast and incomprehensible. Entire civilizations rise and collapse while the universe remains silent and unchanged. The darkest part is realizing how fragile human certainty truly is. People build identities, religions, governments, and systems to feel secure, yet beneath all of it remains an ancient reality that does not bend itself around human comfort, fear, pride, or emotional needs at all whatsoever. Mental enslavement through language. Mental enslavement through language was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Gorgias, the ancient Greek sophist who believed that words possess enormous psychological power and can control human beings more effectively than physical force ever could. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is how easily the mind can be shaped, manipulated, and imprisoned through speech alone. Most people imagine slavery as chains, prisons, or physical violence. Yet Gorgias understood that language can quietly dominate a person's thoughts without touching their body. A carefully chosen sentence can change beliefs, distort reality, create fear, inspire hatred, or convince people to act against their own interests. This becomes terrifying because human beings often mistake words for truth. Repetition, emotional storytelling, confident speech, and persuasive rhetoric can bypass logic entirely and influence people at a subconscious level. Entire societies have been controlled through slogans, propaganda, false promises, and emotionally charged language that slowly reshapes how people think and perceive reality. Gorgias believed words function almost like psychological spells. They can calm, seduce, terrify, or deceive. A person may believe they are thinking independently while unknowingly repeating ideas planted into their mind by politicians, leaders, media, religion, or manipulative individuals. Over time, language can create invisible prisons where people defend beliefs they never truly questioned. The darkest part is that the most dangerous manipulation rarely sounds threatening. It sounds comforting. It sounds inspiring. It sounds familiar. People are often controlled most effectively when they feel emotionally understood and psychologically safe. And once words successfully shape a person's perception of reality, the chains become almost impossible to see because the prisoner begins believing the prison is their own free thought and personal choice. Weaponized truth. Weaponized truth was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Protagoras, the ancient Greek sophist, who argued that human beings measure reality through their own perceptions, experiences, and beliefs, meaning truth itself can become unstable, subjective, and dangerously easy to manipulate. One of the creepiest aspects of human psychology is that people rarely see reality exactly as it is. Instead, they interpret the world through emotion, fear, culture, personal desire, and self-interest. What feels true to one person may feel completely false to another. Protagoras understood that once truth becomes dependent on human perception, it can slowly transform from a path toward wisdom into a powerful tool for control. This becomes terrifying because people naturally trust their own version of reality. A person can justify cruelty if they believe it is righteous. A society can normalize corruption if enough people accept it as necessary. Entire groups can manipulate language, morality, and facts until lies begin feeling emotionally convincing. Over time, truth stops being something discovered and becomes something shaped by power, persuasion, and repetition. This is why weaponized truth spreads so easily through politics, media, religion, and social influence. The most dangerous individuals are often not those who openly lie, but those who reshape perception itself. They understand that if people emotionally accept a narrative, they will defend it, even against evidence. Fear becomes truth. Popularity becomes truth. Repetition becomes truth. The darkest part is how quickly human beings surrender objectivity when their identity feels threatened. Many people would rather protect comforting illusions than face painful realities. Protagoras exposed the frightening possibility that truth, when filtered entirely through human perception, can become flexible enough for anyone to twist into a weapon against others while still believing they are morally right themselves. Performative justice. Performative justice was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Antiphon, the ancient Greek thinker who believed that many legal systems are designed less to protect truth and fairness and more to preserve social image, public order, and the reputation of those in power. One of the creepiest truths about society is that laws do not always exist to create justice. Sometimes they exist to maintain appearances. A society wants people to believe fairness exists because that belief keeps order intact. But underneath the surface, legal systems can become deeply influenced by status, wealth, influence, fear, and public perception rather than genuine morality. This becomes psychologically disturbing when people realize how often reputation matters more than innocence. Powerful individuals may escape consequences because exposing them would damage institutions, businesses, governments, or public trust. Meanwhile, weaker individuals are punished more harshly because society needs visible examples to prove that justice is functioning. Antiphon understood that human beings are deeply concerned with image. Entire societies become obsessed with appearing lawful, civilized, and moral even when corruption quietly operates beneath the surface. Courtrooms, public apologies, political speeches, and punishments can sometimes function more like performances meant to reassure the public than sincere attempts to uncover truth. The darkest part is how easily people cooperate with this illusion. Many prefer the comfort of believing the system is fair instead of confronting the unsettling reality that justice can be selective. Over time, people learn to protect appearances instead of principles. They stay silent to preserve careers, institutions, relationships, or social stability. And once a society becomes more concerned with preserving its image than confronting truth honestly, injustice no longer hides in darkness. It begins operating openly while still wearing the mask of morality and fairness before the public every single day. Disguised selfishness. Disguised selfishness was a dark philosophical insight associated with Prodicus, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that human beings often hide selfish desires beneath noble language in order to protect their image, justify their actions, and avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. One of the creepiest things about human nature is how easily people can make selfishness sound moral. A person may call greed ambition, call control love, call cowardice peace, or call envy justice. The words sound respectable, but underneath them often lives the same hunger for power, validation, comfort, attention, or personal gain. This becomes disturbing because many people genuinely believe their own disguises. The human mind is incredibly skilled at rewriting motives to avoid guilt. Someone may destroy another person while convincing themselves they are simply protecting their peace. Others manipulate relationships while calling it care, or pursue status while pretending it is about responsibility and purpose. Prodicus understood that language can become a mask people wear to hide from themselves. Once selfish desires receive noble names, they become easier to defend publicly and harder to question internally. Entire societies begin rewarding appearances instead of honesty. People learn to sound virtuous while secretly serving their own ego, insecurity, or emotional cravings. The darkest part is that disguised selfishness spreads quietly through politics, religion, relationships, and even acts of kindness. People often trust words without examining the hidden desires underneath them. A leader may speak about honor while craving control. A person may speak about loyalty while fearing abandonment. Someone may appear generous while secretly needing admiration. And over time, many individuals become so attached to the noble image they created that they lose the ability to recognize their real motives anymore, even when those motives are slowly harming themselves and others around them daily. Undisciplined intelligence. Undisciplined intelligence was a dark philosophical warning associated with Hippias, the ancient Greek sophist who believed that intelligence alone does not free a person, because a brilliant mind without discipline can slowly become trapped by its own desires, distractions, and uncontrolled thoughts. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that intelligence can become self-destructive when it lacks structure and restraint. Many people assume cleverness automatically leads to wisdom, success, or inner freedom. But Hippias understood that the human mind can become a prison even when it is highly intelligent. In fact, The more mentally gifted a person is, the more dangerous their inner chaos can become if left unchecked. This happens because an undisciplined mind constantly searches for stimulation, justification, and escape. A clever person can rationalize bad habits, manipulate others, avoid responsibility, or convince themselves that they are above rules and limitations. Intelligence becomes dangerous when it serves ego instead of character. The mind starts creating excuses faster than conscience can challenge them. What makes this especially disturbing is how invisible it appears from the outside. Highly intelligent people are often admired, praised, and respected while privately battling impulsiveness, addiction, arrogance, emotional instability, or destructive obsessions. Their intelligence decorates the prison beautifully, making the cage look impressive even while it quietly traps them from within. Hippias believed discipline is what transforms intelligence into wisdom. Without discipline, knowledge simply increases a person's ability to deceive themselves. The mind becomes overcrowded with ideas, but empty of peace and direction. And the darkest part is that many intelligent people never realize they are imprisoned because their cleverness constantly protects them from confronting the uncomfortable truth about who they are becoming internally over time. Linguistic entrapment. Linguistic entrapment was a haunting philosophical idea connected to Cratylus, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed language does not always reveal reality clearly and may actually distort, simplify, or imprison human understanding of the world itself. One of the creepiest truths about human existence is that people experience reality through words long before they fully experience it directly. Language shapes thought, emotion, memory, identity, and perception so deeply that most individuals never realize how trapped they are inside the limits of the words they use every day. Cratylus understood that once something is named, categorized, or described, the human mind begins mistaking the label for the thing itself. This becomes psychologically disturbing because reality is constantly changing while language freezes it into fixed concepts. People use simple words like success, failure, love, intelligence, or evil as if those things have stable meanings, yet every person secretly imagines something different when hearing them. Entire conflicts emerge because human beings assume others understand reality exactly the way they do, simply because they share the same vocabulary. The darker side of linguistic entrapment appears when language begins controlling thought itself. Governments, institutions, media, and ideologies often reshape words to influence perception. Once language changes, emotional reactions change with it. People can be manipulated into fearing, hating, or worshiping something purely through carefully chosen words and repeated narratives. Cratylus believed language can quietly imprison human consciousness by making people believe they fully understand reality when they only understand descriptions of it. The terrifying part is that most individuals never question the invisible walls language creates around their thinking. They spend their entire lives reacting not to reality itself, but to mental interpretations constructed through words they inherited from others long before they learned how to think independently for themselves. Emotional independence. Emotional independence was a powerful and unsettling idea associated with Stilpo, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that the hardest person to control is the one who no longer depends heavily on external approval, possessions, comfort, or emotional validation to feel complete. One of the creepiest truths about human society is that most control begins with dependency. People are manipulated through what they desperately need. Some need money, some need love, others need status, attention, comfort, security, or social acceptance. Once those needs become powerful enough, fear enters the mind. The fear of losing them slowly turns people into prisoners without visible chains. Stilpo understood something deeply uncomfortable about human psychology. The more emotionally dependent a person becomes, the easier they are to influence, threaten, tempt, or break. Entire systems of power quietly rely on this weakness. Employers control workers through financial fear. Toxic relationships survive through emotional dependence. Governments maintain influence through comfort, fear, and social conditioning. Even public opinion gains power because people crave acceptance from strangers they barely know. This idea becomes disturbing because most individuals spend their lives strengthening the very dependencies that make them vulnerable. They build identities around possessions, relationships, titles, and public image without realizing how fragile those things truly are. Once those external sources disappear, many people emotionally collapse because they never developed inner stability. The darkest part is that emotional independence often frightens society itself. A person who cannot be easily bribed, emotionally manipulated, or controlled through fear becomes unpredictable to systems built on dependency. They become difficult to pressure because they already accepted the possibility of loss. And that is what made Stilpo's philosophy so unsettling. The less a person desperately needs from the world, the less power the world quietly holds over them psychologically. Arrogant intelligence. Arrogant intelligence was a disturbing philosophical warning associated with Menedemus, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that pride frequently hides itself behind knowledge, making people mistake arrogance for wisdom and intellectual superiority for genuine understanding. One of the creepiest things about human psychology is that intelligence can quietly become a mask for insecurity and ego. Some people do not seek knowledge to grow, understand, or become wiser. They seek it to feel superior. They use intelligence as a weapon to dominate conversations, humiliate others, protect their pride, and create the illusion that they are above criticism. This becomes dangerous because arrogance often sounds intelligent. Proud people usually speak with certainty, confidence, and authority. They dismiss opposing views quickly. They rarely admit confusion or weakness because their identity depends on appearing intellectually untouchable. Over time, their need to feel superior becomes stronger than their desire to discover truth. Menedemus understood that truly wise people remain aware of how limited human understanding actually is, but arrogant minds become trapped by the belief that they already know enough. The more pride enters intelligence, the more the mind stops listening, questioning, and evolving. Knowledge slowly transforms from a tool for growth into armor, protecting the ego. The darkest part is that society often rewards this behavior. Confident arrogance is mistaken for competence. Humility is mistaken for weakness. People are drawn toward those who sound certain, even when that certainty hides emotional fragility underneath. Over time, intellectual pride isolates people from reality itself. They stop learning because learning requires vulnerability. They stop growing because growth requires admitting imperfection. And eventually, their intelligence becomes less about understanding life and more about protecting the image they desperately want others to admire constantly around them publicly. False certainty. False certainty was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Carneades, the ancient Greek skeptic who believed that many people mistake strong confidence for actual truth, even when their beliefs may be fragile, incomplete, or entirely wrong underneath the surface. One of the creepiest things about human psychology is how desperately people crave certainty. The mind feels uncomfortable with doubt, ambiguity, and unanswered questions, so individuals often cling to beliefs that make them feel emotionally secure rather than intellectually honest. Carneades understood that certainty can become a psychological shield people wear to protect themselves from fear, confusion, and insecurity. This becomes dangerous because confidence is extremely persuasive. A person who speaks boldly, refuses doubt, and appears emotionally certain can influence entire groups of people, even when their ideas are flawed. Human beings naturally associate confidence with intelligence, leadership, and truthfulness because certainty feels safe. Doubt, on the other hand, makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to confront uncertainty about reality itself. Carneades believed many individuals defend their beliefs not because they are true, but because those beliefs protect their identity, pride, or emotional stability. People often become emotionally attached to opinions, ideologies, religions, or political views until questioning them feels like a threat to their entire sense of self. The darkest part is that false certainty can survive for generations. Entire societies can confidently believe dangerous ideas simply because those ideas are repeated with enough emotional conviction. Over time, confidence becomes armor protecting ignorance from examination. And once a person becomes addicted to certainty, they stop searching for truth entirely, because admitting doubt would require confronting the terrifying possibility that much of what they trusted may have been built more on emotional comfort than genuine understanding. Protective doubt. Protective doubt was a dark philosophical idea associated with Arcesilaus, the ancient Greek skeptic who believed that wise people question certainty because the world repeatedly punishes those who believe too quickly, trust too easily, or accept comforting illusions without deeper examination. One of the creepiest things about human nature is how desperately people want certainty even when certainty is dangerous. The human mind craves simple answers because doubt feels emotionally exhausting. People want to know who to trust, what to believe, and how the world works. But Arcesilaus understood that this hunger for certainty often blinds individuals to manipulation, deception, and painful reality. This becomes psychologically terrifying because many of the most destructive beliefs feel convincing precisely because they provide emotional comfort. False leaders offer certainty. Dangerous ideologies offer certainty. Manipulators speak with confidence because people instinctively trust those who appear sure of themselves. Over time, individuals begin surrendering their judgment in exchange for the temporary relief of believing someone else already has all the answers. Arcesilaus believed wisdom begins when a person becomes suspicious of absolute certainty itself. The intelligent mind hesitates because reality is complicated, unstable, and often deceptive. Human perception fails. Emotions distort judgment. Memory changes over time. Even intelligent people can passionately defend ideas that later collapse under scrutiny. The darker part is that society often punishes doubt while rewarding confidence. A cautious person appears weak, while a confident fool appears powerful. Many people would rather follow certainty into disaster than tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty. This is why crowds become dangerous. Individuals stop questioning and begin obeying. Arcesilaus revealed a deeply unsettling truth about survival. Sometimes doubt is not confusion at all. Sometimes doubt is the only thing protecting the mind from becoming enslaved by comforting lies, emotional manipulation, and destructive certainty disguised as truth, radical uncertainty. Radical uncertainty was a deeply unsettling idea associated with Pyrrho, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that much of human suffering comes from the desperate need to force reality into clear explanations, permanent truths, and emotionally satisfying answers. One of the creepiest aspects of human psychology is how uncomfortable people become when they cannot fully understand something. The human mind constantly searches for certainty because uncertainty feels threatening. People want definite answers about life, death, morality, relationships, suffering, and existence itself. They want reality to make emotional sense. They want events to feel fair, predictable, and explainable. Pyrrho challenged this need completely. He believed that peace begins when people stop demanding absolute certainty from a world that may never provide it. This becomes psychologically disturbing because it forces individuals to confront how little control they truly have over existence. Much of reality remains unclear, unpredictable, and beyond human understanding, no matter how intelligent humanity becomes. The darker part is how far people will go to escape uncertainty. Entire belief systems, ideologies, and emotional attachments are often built to protect the mind from confusion and existential fear. Many people cling to opinions not because they are true, but because certainty feels emotionally comforting. Doubt threatens identity itself. Pyrrho understood that the endless pursuit of absolute answers can quietly destroy inner peace. People become trapped in overthinking, fear, anger, and anxiety because they demand explanations for every tragedy, betrayal, loss, or injustice they experience. What makes this philosophy so eerie is the realization that reality may not owe human beings clarity at all. The universe may remain silent about many things people desperately want explained. And sometimes the mind suffers not because uncertainty exists, but because it refuses to accept that uncertainty may always exist permanently. Exhausted surrender. Exhausted surrender was a dark philosophical insight associated with Sextus Empiricus, the ancient Greek skeptic who believed that many arguments succeed not because they are true or logical, but because people eventually become mentally exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed. One of the creepiest realities about human behavior is that truth does not always win debates. In many situations, the person who talks the longest, repeats themselves the most, applies emotional pressure, or refuses to stop arguing, eventually gains control simply because the other person becomes tired. Mental exhaustion weakens resistance. People often surrender to end discomfort, not because they genuinely agree. This becomes psychologically disturbing because exhaustion slowly changes perception itself. After enough pressure, confusion, repetition, and emotional tension, the mind begins craving relief more than accuracy. A person may accept false ideas, tolerate manipulation, or abandon their own beliefs simply to escape the stress of constant conflict. Over time, exhaustion can silence intelligence more effectively than force. Sextus Empiricus understood that human beings are deeply vulnerable when mentally drained. Endless arguments, social pressure, fear of isolation, and emotional fatigue weaken critical thinking. The tired mind becomes easier to influence because it loses the energy required to question, resist, or think clearly. This is why propaganda, manipulation, and psychological control often rely on repetition rather than truth. The darkest part is that many people mistake surrender for agreement. Someone may nod, apologize, or stop resisting while internally feeling defeated rather than convinced. In relationships, politics, media, and society, emotional exhaustion quietly becomes a tool of control, and eventually, many individuals stop searching for truth entirely because endless conflict convinces them that silence feels safer than thinking deeply anymore. Social madness. Social madness was a brutal philosophical idea associated with Diogenes, the ancient Greek cynic philosopher who believed that society often labels honest people as insane simply because they refuse to participate in collective hypocrisy and comfortable illusions. One of the creepiest truths about human civilization is that groups of people can normalize unhealthy behavior so deeply that anyone who questions it appears dangerous, unstable, or abnormal. Diogenes understood that society creates invisible rules about success, status, beauty, wealth, and morality, then punishes those who refuse to obey them. The frightening part is that these rules are often built on vanity, greed, fear, and emotional insecurity rather than genuine wisdom. This creates a disturbing psychological reality. A person who rejects material obsession may be called lazy. Someone who refuses social performance may be called strange. A person who speaks uncomfortable truths may be labeled bitter, crazy, or unstable because honesty threatens the emotional comfort of the crowd. Society often protects its illusions aggressively because many people build their entire identity around them. Diogenes deliberately lived in poverty, mocked social status, and exposed human hypocrisy because he believed most people were trapped inside artificial desires they mistook for freedom. He saw civilization as a giant performance where individuals compete endlessly for approval while secretly feeling empty underneath. What makes this idea especially unsettling is how easily crowds can redefine sanity itself. If enough people believe in the same illusion, truth begins looking irrational by comparison. Over time, conformity becomes mistaken for mental health, while independent thinking appears dangerous. And the darkest part is that many people would rather protect a comforting lie with the crowd than stand alone with an uncomfortable truth that exposes how fake the system around them truly is every single day. Spiritual softness. Spiritual softness was a dark philosophical warning associated with Antisthenes, the ancient Greek founder of cynicism who believed luxury weakens human beings internally long before physical decline becomes visible on the outside. One of the creepiest things about comfort is that it rarely feels dangerous while it is changing you. Luxury enters life quietly through convenience, pleasure, entertainment, status, and constant ease. At first, it feels harmless. A softer bed, easier food, endless distraction, faster pleasure, less struggle. But Antisthenes believed the soul slowly weakens when a person becomes emotionally dependent on comfort for stability and happiness. This becomes psychologically disturbing because softness develops invisibly. People still look strong, successful, and confident, while their inner resilience quietly disappears. The moment discomfort enters their life, they panic. Small inconveniences create frustration. Criticism feels unbearable. Silence feels empty. Hardship suddenly becomes emotionally overwhelming because the mind has lost its tolerance for struggle. Antisthenes understood that luxury changes desire itself. Once people become accustomed to constant comfort, ordinary life begins feeling insufficient. Pleasure stops being appreciated and starts becoming expected. The human mind adapts quickly, demanding more stimulation, more convenience, and more emotional escape just to maintain the same level of satisfaction. The darker part is that society often rewards this softness while calling it success. People admire lives filled with excess, ease, and indulgence without noticing the hidden psychological cost. Individuals become physically comfortable but spiritually fragile. They avoid difficulty, sacrifice, patience, and discipline because discomfort now feels unnatural. Antisthenes warned that this is how inner strength quietly dies. The body may still appear healthy and functional, but the soul becomes weak, dependent, impatient, and terrified of suffering long before the person even realizes what has been taken from them internally forever. Freedom from shame. Freedom from shame was a provocative philosophical idea associated with Crates, the ancient cynic philosopher who believed that many human beings live trapped inside invisible prisons created by embarrassment, social judgment, and the constant fear of what other people think. One of the creepiest truths about society is how deeply human behavior is controlled by shame. Most people do not live according to truth, desire, or personal conviction. They live according to what protects them from ridicule, rejection, criticism, or humiliation. Entire personalities are shaped by fear long before people realize it. They suppress opinions, hide emotions, avoid risks, and perform artificial versions of themselves simply to avoid social discomfort. Krates rejected this completely. He believed true freedom begins the moment a person no longer allows embarrassment to control their decisions. This idea becomes unsettling because it exposes how much of civilization depends on social pressure to maintain order. People obey expectations not always because they agree with them, but because they fear becoming outsiders. The darker part is that shame often operates invisibly. A person may believe they are making independent choices while secretly being controlled by the desire to appear normal, attractive, intelligent, successful, or respectable. Even happiness becomes restricted because people avoid anything that threatens their carefully constructed image. Krates understood that once a person becomes emotionally comfortable with judgment, ridicule loses much of its power. A human being who no longer fears embarrassment becomes difficult to manipulate because social approval no longer controls their identity. What makes this philosophy disturbing is realizing how many lives are quietly wasted inside self-created cages of shame. People spend decades seeking permission to be themselves while slowly losing contact with who they truly are underneath the performance society trained them to maintain every single day. Fearless defiance. Fearless defiance was a radical philosophical idea embodied by Hipparchia, the ancient Cynic philosopher who shocked Greek society by rejecting traditional expectations placed upon women and refusing to feel shame for living according to her own convictions. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how uncomfortable many people become when someone stops feeling ashamed of things society taught them to hide. Hipparchia understood that shame is often used as a form of control. Society teaches people, especially women, to fear judgment, rejection, embarrassment, and public disapproval because ashamed people are easier to manipulate and easier to silence. This becomes psychologically disturbing when someone completely rejects that fear. A woman who no longer apologizes for her intelligence, ambition, opinions, freedom, or independence becomes deeply unsettling to insecure individuals. Weak men especially may interpret confidence as rebellion because her fearlessness exposes their need for control and validation. Hipparchia frightened society not because she was violent or cruel, but because she refused to play the role people expected from her. She spoke openly, challenged social rules, rejected luxury, and lived publicly according to Cynic philosophy beside her husband Krates. In doing so, she destroyed the illusion that shame was necessary for social order. The darkest part is that many people secretly rely on the insecurity of others to feel powerful. They feel comfortable when others doubt themselves, stay quiet, or seek approval constantly. But when someone becomes emotionally free from shame, manipulation begins losing its power over them. And this is why fearless people often attract hostility. Their existence silently reminds others that many social rules are built less on truth and morality and more on fear, insecurity, and the desire to keep certain individuals emotionally controlled for generations without question. Endless desire. Endless desire was a dark philosophical idea associated with Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that much of human suffering is self-created through the endless pursuit of unnecessary desires, pleasures, and emotional cravings beyond what nature truly requires for peace. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people rarely suffer only because they lack necessities. More often, they suffer because their minds constantly demand more than enough. More money, more status, more pleasure, more attention, more beauty, more validation, more control. The human mind adapts quickly to comfort, turning temporary satisfaction into permanent hunger. Epicurus understood that natural needs are actually simple: food, shelter, safety, companionship, and inner calm are enough for a stable life. But civilization teaches people to confuse survival with endless consumption. Individuals begin believing happiness exists somewhere in the next achievement, relationship, purchase, or social victory. The moment one desire is satisfied, another immediately replaces it. This creates a terrifying cycle because desire never truly rests. A person can become wealthy yet remain emotionally starving. They can achieve fame while feeling empty. They can gain admiration while secretly fearing irrelevance. The mind becomes trapped, chasing emotional satisfaction that constantly moves further away. What makes endless desire especially dangerous is that society rewards it. Obsession is praised as ambition. Addiction is disguised as luxury. Emotional dependence is mistaken for love. People slowly lose the ability to enjoy simple existence because stimulation becomes necessary just to avoid feeling empty inside. And the darkest part is that many individuals spend their entire lives pursuing things they were taught to want, only to realize too late that their endless cravings quietly stole the peace they already could have possessed from the very beginning of their existence: death anxiety. Death anxiety was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with Lucretius, the Roman philosopher, who believed human beings often destroy their own lives because they are terrified of losing them in the future. One of the creepiest things about the fear of death is how silently it controls human behavior. Most people believe they fear death itself, but Lucretius argued that the deeper fear comes from uncertainty, loss of control, and the terrifying realization that everything familiar will eventually disappear. This fear quietly shapes decisions, relationships, ambitions, and emotional habits without most individuals even realizing it. This becomes psychologically disturbing because people often spend their entire lives trying to escape the awareness of death instead of truly living. They chase endless distractions, wealth, status, pleasure, or constant busyness because silence forces them to confront mortality. Some cling to unhealthy relationships because being alone reminds them how temporary life feels. Others obsess over success because they hope achievements will make them feel permanent in a world where everything eventually fades. Lucretius understood that fear of death creates a tragic contradiction. In trying so desperately to avoid thoughts of dying, people stop experiencing life deeply. They become anxious, restless, emotionally guarded, and obsessed with preserving security at all costs. Many avoid risks, suppress emotions, and postpone happiness because they are waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. The darker part is that death anxiety can make people emotionally absent from the very life they are trying to protect. They become prisoners of future fear instead of participants in the present moment. Lucretius believed the cruelest irony of human existence is that many people die long before their bodies do because fear slowly drains curiosity, wonder, courage, and genuine aliveness from the soul over many years of quiet, psychological avoidance. Illusion of control. The illusion of control was a dark and powerful philosophical idea founded by Zeno of Citium, the creator of Stoicism, who believed that much of human suffering comes from trying to control people, events, outcomes, and circumstances that were never truly within human power to begin with. One of the creepiest things about human psychology is how desperately people cling to control. They try to control how others feel about them, how relationships unfold, how the future happens, how success arrives, and even how life itself should behave. The mind constantly creates expectations because certainty feels emotionally safe, but reality rarely obeys human expectation for long. Zeno understood that this creates a hidden form of psychological torture, The more emotionally attached a person becomes to controlling external things, the more fragile their peace becomes. A single rejection, betrayal, failure, illness, or unexpected event can emotionally destroy them because their inner stability depended on forces they never truly owned. This becomes especially disturbing in relationships. People try to control loyalty, love, attraction, or emotional responses from others, forgetting that another human mind can never be fully possessed. Parents try to control children. Leaders try to control public opinion. Individuals try to control aging, reputation, and time itself. Eventually, reality reminds everyone of the same terrifying truth. Most things remain beyond human command. The darker part is that people often mistake obsession for responsibility. They exhaust themselves mentally, trying to force outcomes instead of accepting uncertainty. Overthinking becomes endless because the mind keeps fighting battles reality never promised it could win. What made Zeno's philosophy unsettling was the realization that peace does not come from gaining more control over life. It comes from emotionally releasing what was never fully yours to control in the first place. Painful discipline. Painful discipline was a harsh philosophical reality associated with Cleanthes, the Stoic philosopher who believed that true discipline is rarely glamorous in the moment and often feels exhausting, lonely, repetitive, and emotionally uncomfortable while it is shaping a person from within. One of the creepiest truths about self-control is that discipline usually looks ugly before it looks admirable. People celebrate the results of discipline after success becomes visible, but almost nobody truly respects the painful process itself. Waking up early when exhausted, resisting temptation while emotionally empty, continuing without motivation, and enduring discomfort without immediate reward can feel psychologically brutal. This is what makes discipline so disturbing to the human mind. It demands sacrifice before proof. It asks people to suffer quietly without guarantees. Most individuals want transformation to feel inspiring, but real discipline often feels boring, frustrating, isolating, and deeply repetitive. There are no dramatic moments during most periods of growth, only silent repetition that slowly reshapes the mind over time. Cleanthes understood this better than most philosophers because he lived through hardship himself. He worked exhausting physical labor at night while studying philosophy during the day. His life revealed that discipline is not always elegant wisdom and inner peace. Sometimes it is simply enduring discomfort long enough for character to form underneath pressure. The darkest part is that modern society constantly glorifies comfort while secretly admiring the people who resisted it. People praise strength but avoid the suffering required to build it. They admire confidence while fearing the loneliness that often creates it. And this is why discipline feels terrifying to many people. It forces individuals to confront who they are without excuses, distractions, validation, or emotional comfort protecting them from themselves anymore. Corrupt rationality. Corrupt rationality was a disturbing philosophical warning associated with Chrysippus, the ancient Greek Stoic philosopher who believed that intelligence and logic alone cannot transform a person whose character is already corrupted by greed, ego, cruelty, or emotional weakness. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that highly intelligent people are often capable of justifying terrible behavior more effectively than ordinary people. Many assume logic naturally leads to morality, wisdom, or self-control. But Chrysippus understood that reason can easily become a servant of corruption instead of a force against it. A corrupt mind does not lose the ability to think. It loses the desire to be honest with itself. This becomes psychologically dangerous because logic can disguise darkness in respectable language. A selfish person can rationalize manipulation as strategy. A cruel person can justify harm as necessity. An arrogant person can convince themselves they are simply superior. Intelligence gives people the power to defend their impulses instead of confronting them. What makes this especially unsettling is how convincing corrupt rationality can appear. Some of the most destructive individuals in history were not irrational fools. They were disciplined thinkers capable of building elegant arguments for immoral actions. The human mind can construct complex explanations to avoid guilt, responsibility, or self-examination. Chrysippus believed true wisdom requires moral discipline alongside reason. Without character, logic becomes dangerous because it strengthens whatever already controls the soul. If greed controls the heart, intelligence helps greed survive. If ego controls the mind, logic becomes armor protecting pride from truth. And the darkest part is that many people mistake cleverness for goodness. They admire sharp thinking, persuasive speech, and intellectual confidence while failing to notice the corruption quietly guiding the person underneath all the intelligence and polished reasoning they present to the world around them daily. Voluntary humiliation. Voluntary humiliation was a harsh philosophical idea associated with Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who believed that other people cannot truly humiliate you unless you emotionally surrender your self-worth to their judgment first. One of the creepiest things about human psychology is how deeply people depend on external validation without realizing it. A stranger's insult can ruin an entire day. Public embarrassment can haunt someone for years. Rejection, mockery, criticism, or social humiliation often feel physically painful because the human mind ties personal value to how others perceive it. Epictetus believed this emotional dependence quietly gives other people control over your inner world. This becomes psychologically disturbing because humiliation is often self-created internally before it is imposed externally. Two people can experience the exact same insult while reacting completely differently. One person collapses emotionally while the other remains calm and untouched. The difference is not the insult itself, but the meaning each person allows it to carry. When individuals secretly fear being seen as weak, stupid, unattractive, or unworthy, insults strike directly into hidden insecurities already living inside them. Epictetus understood that society trains people to crave approval from childhood. Reputation becomes identity. Social acceptance becomes emotional survival. Over time, individuals become terrified of embarrassment because they believe public judgment defines their worth as human beings. The darker part is that manipulative people understand this weakness instinctively. They use shame, ridicule, exclusion, and public humiliation to control behavior because most people fear social rejection more than truth itself. Entire groups can emotionally dominate individuals simply by threatening their image or status. Epictetus revealed a deeply unsettling truth. Humiliation only becomes powerful when a person internally agrees with the attack. The moment someone stops handing strangers authority over their self-worth, humiliation begins losing its psychological grip entirely. Wasted existence. Wasted existence was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher who believed that human beings do not truly suffer from having short lives, but from spending most of their lives distracted, careless, emotionally asleep, and disconnected from what actually matters. One of the creepiest truths about human life is how easily time disappears unnoticed. People wake up, repeat routines, chase temporary pleasures, worry endlessly, scroll endlessly, seek approval, delay meaningful action, and assume there will always be more time later. Years quietly vanish while the mind remains distracted by small problems, shallow entertainment, and meaningless emotional drama. Seneca understood that this is one of the greatest psychological tragedies of existence. Most people protect their money, possessions, and reputation more carefully than they protect their time, even though time is the only thing they can never recover once it disappears. They waste entire decades living automatically without questioning whether they are truly alive or simply surviving habits. The darker part is that people often realize this too late. Many spend their healthiest years chasing things that ultimately leave them empty. They postpone peace, postpone purpose, postpone honesty, and postpone relationships that matter because they believe life will patiently wait for them. But time moves silently, without emotion, without warning, and without mercy. What makes Seneca's philosophy especially unsettling is the realization that people can appear busy, productive, and successful while internally wasting their existence completely. A crowded schedule can still hide an empty life, and the most frightening part is that death often does not steal life suddenly. Sometimes people slowly surrender it themselves day after day through distraction, fear, emotional avoidance, and unconscious living until years disappear before they fully realize what they lost forever. Shared mortality. Shared mortality was a haunting philosophical realization deeply connected to Marcus Aurelius, the Roman Stoic emperor who believed that even the people who betray, insult, humiliate, or hurt us are still fragile human beings moving toward the same inevitable death as everyone else. One of the creepiest truths about life is that hatred begins losing its power when you fully realize how temporary human existence really is. The person who embarrassed you, abandoned you, lied to you, or treated you cruelly may appear powerful in the moment, but beneath their anger, pride, and behavior is a human being slowly aging, weakening, and moving toward death just like you. This idea becomes emotionally disturbing because the human mind prefers clear villains. People want to see enemies as emotionally untouchable monsters rather than vulnerable individuals carrying fear, pain, insecurity, regret, and mortality inside them. Marcus Aurelius forced himself to remember that every person he encountered, no matter how cruel, would eventually disappear from the earth forever. That realization changes the emotional weight of conflict. Arguments that once felt enormous begin looking temporary. Revenge starts feeling empty. Pride begins losing importance. Even powerful people suddenly appear fragile when viewed through the reality of death and time. Marcus Aurelius understood that human cruelty often comes from weakness rather than strength. Many people hurt others while secretly struggling with fears they cannot control, wounds they never healed, or insecurities they constantly hide. Their harmful behavior becomes less mysterious when seen through the lens of suffering and mortality. The darkest part is realizing that everyone around you is fighting private battles while quietly moving toward the same ending. Every face you see, including your own, is temporary. Every conflict eventually fades, and someday, both the wounded and the one who caused the wound will disappear completely from the world forever. Permanent change. Permanent change was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that nothing in existence remains stable, and everything people love is constantly transforming, fading, aging, or becoming something entirely different over time. One of the creepiest truths about life is that loss begins the moment attachment begins. The people you love are already changing. Your body is already aging. Memories are already fading. Relationships are already evolving into versions of themselves you cannot fully control. Heraclitus understood that existence is not fixed or permanent, no matter how desperately humans wish it were. This becomes emotionally terrifying because the human mind craves stability. People want to freeze beautiful moments forever. They want love to remain untouched, youth to remain alive, and happiness to stay exactly as it feels in the present moment. But reality never stops moving. Every conversation, every year, every experience slowly transforms people into someone slightly different than before. Heraclitus described life as a flowing river because nothing stays identical for even a single moment. A person cannot step into the same river twice because both the river and the person have already changed. This idea becomes deeply unsettling when applied to human relationships and identity itself. Even the version of yourself you currently know will eventually disappear. What makes permanent change especially painful is that people often notice transformation only after something precious has already slipped away. Childhood suddenly feels distant. Parents become old. Friends drift apart. Familiar places lose their emotional warmth. Time quietly reshapes everything while people remain distracted by ordinary life. And the darkest part is realizing that many individuals spend their lives clinging desperately to permanence in a universe built entirely on change, decay, movement, and transformation beyond human control or emotional resistance from the very beginning. Deceptive perception. Deceptive perception was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with Parmenides, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed human senses cannot always be trusted because reality may be far different from what people emotionally and physically experience every day. One of the creepiest truths about human existence is that most people trust their senses automatically. They trust what they see, hear, feel, and remember because perception feels immediate and convincing. But Parmenides warned that the senses constantly mislead human beings, creating illusions that feel real simply because the mind experiences them directly. What appears obvious may actually be distorted by emotion, limitation, and human interpretation. This becomes psychologically terrifying because perception shapes almost every decision people make. Human beings fall in love based on appearances. They fear things that may not truly threaten them. They judge others through incomplete observations. Entire beliefs about reality are built on senses that can easily fail. Optical illusions, false memories, emotional bias, dreams, hallucinations, and manipulated narratives all reveal how fragile human perception truly is. Parmenides believed the deeper reality beneath existence may remain hidden from ordinary human awareness. The senses focus only on change, movement, emotion, and surface appearances, while ignoring truths that exist beyond immediate experience. This means people can spend their entire lives reacting emotionally to illusions without realizing how much of reality they never actually perceive clearly. The darker part is that human beings often defend their perceptions aggressively because admitting uncertainty feels threatening to the ego. People would rather cling to familiar illusions than confront the terrifying possibility that their understanding of reality may be incomplete or deeply flawed. Parmenides exposed a chilling possibility. The first thing human beings ever learn to trust may also be the very thing quietly deceiving them from the beginning of life itself every single day. Creative destruction. Creative destruction was a dark and fascinating philosophical idea associated with Empedocles, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that both love and conflict are fundamental forces shaping existence, and that creation itself often emerges through tension, division, attraction, and destruction working together constantly. One of the creepiest truths about reality is that growth rarely comes from peace alone. Human beings naturally associate love with creation and conflict with destruction. Yet Empedocles believed the universe operates through both forces equally. Attraction brings things together, while conflict tears them apart, so something new can eventually emerge from the ruins. This becomes psychologically disturbing because people often imagine suffering, chaos, heartbreak, and struggle as meaningless interruptions to life rather than forces that reshape identity itself. Relationships transform people through both affection and pain. Families are formed through love yet fractured by conflict. Entire civilizations rise through unity and collapse through internal tension. Even personal growth often begins after emotional destruction breaks old versions of the self apart. Empedocles understood that conflict is not always the opposite of creation. Sometimes destruction becomes the hidden doorway through which transformation enters human life. A painful betrayal can awaken wisdom. Failure can destroy illusion. Isolation can force self-discovery. Emotional suffering can expose truths comfort kept hidden for years. The darker part is realizing that human beings are emotionally shaped not only by what embraces them, but also by what wounds them. The mind carries scars that permanently alter perception, behavior, and identity. Some people become stronger through conflict, while others become colder, fearful, or emotionally fragmented. What makes this philosophy unsettling is the realization that life itself may depend on cycles of attachment and destruction repeating endlessly. Love builds, conflict breaks, and from both forces combined, entirely new versions of people, societies, and realities slowly emerge over time. Absurd reality. Absurd reality was a dark philosophical insight associated with Democritus, the ancient Greek philosopher often called the laughing philosopher, who believed people laugh not because life is safe or harmless, but because reality itself is strange, chaotic, irrational, and emotionally difficult to fully accept. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that laughter is not always a sign of happiness. Sometimes people laugh because reality feels too absurd to process seriously. Human beings live fragile lives, chase temporary goals, fear death constantly, and create endless social rules and conflicts, all while existing in a universe that does not explain itself clearly. The deeper people think about existence, the stranger everything begins to feel. This is what Democritus understood. He saw human life as filled with contradiction. People obsess over status even though everyone dies. They fight over pride while time erases entire civilizations. They pretend to understand reality while barely understanding themselves. And instead of collapsing under the weight of these truths, many people respond with humor, sarcasm, distraction, and laughter. The disturbing part is that laughter can become a psychological defense mechanism against fear, confusion, and meaninglessness. People joke about death, trauma, loneliness, and suffering because humor creates temporary emotional distance from painful realities they do not know how to face directly. Sometimes entire societies laugh together while quietly falling apart internally. Democritus believed the world was not neatly ordered around human expectations. Reality contains randomness, cruelty, confusion, and irony beyond human control. The more deeply someone sees this, the harder it becomes to take human arrogance seriously. And this is why some of the deepest laughter often hides exhaustion, fear, emptiness, or the terrifying realization that existence itself may be far stranger than the human mind can comfortably handle. Spiritual emptiness. Spiritual emptiness was a disturbing philosophical warning associated with Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, who believed that a person can achieve success, wealth, admiration, and social status while still living a deeply hollow life if they never truly examine themselves honestly. One of the creepiest truths about human existence is that people can spend decades appearing successful while secretly feeling disconnected from who they really are. A person may build a career, earn money, gain respect, marry, raise children, and follow society's expectations, yet never stop to ask why they are living the way they are living. Socrates believed this unconscious existence creates a hidden form of inner emptiness that slowly consumes the soul over time. This becomes psychologically disturbing because modern life rewards distraction. People are constantly pushed toward achievement, entertainment, productivity, and social approval, leaving little room for self-examination. Many individuals become experts at managing appearances while remaining strangers to their own fears, desires, weaknesses, and deeper purpose. They learn how to function efficiently without ever learning themselves honestly. Socrates understood that avoiding self-reflection feels safer because examining the mind often reveals uncomfortable truths. People may discover they are driven by insecurity instead of ambition, loneliness instead of love, or fear instead of purpose. The human mind naturally avoids questioning beliefs and habits that provide emotional comfort. What makes spiritual emptiness especially terrifying is that it can remain invisible for years. A person may look fulfilled externally while internally feeling numb, restless, or emotionally detached from life itself. They continue moving forward simply because stopping would force confrontation with the silence inside. And the darkest part is that many people only recognize the emptiness after years have already passed, when they suddenly realize they successfully built a life they never truly understood or consciously chose for themselves at all. Shadow reality. Shadow reality was a dark philosophical idea associated with Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed most people mistake illusions, appearances, and social narratives for genuine truth because they rarely question the reality presented in front of them. One of the creepiest things about human nature is how easily people accept familiar illusions as truth when those illusions are repeated long enough. Plato explored this through his famous allegory of the cave, where prisoners spend their entire lives watching shadows projected onto a wall, believing those shadows are reality itself because they have never seen anything beyond them. The terrifying part is not the shadows, but how comfortable people become living inside them. This becomes psychologically disturbing because modern human life operates in a similar way. People often build their identities, beliefs, fears, and desires around incomplete versions of reality shaped by culture, media, politics, social pressure, and emotional conditioning. Many individuals never question whether the things they chase are genuinely meaningful or simply accepted illusions inherited from society. Plato understood that human beings resist uncomfortable truth because illusions provide emotional safety. A person who challenges accepted narratives is often mocked, rejected, or treated as dangerous because crowds protect familiar beliefs even when those beliefs are false. The mind prefers comforting shadows over painful reality because certainty feels safer than doubt. The darker part is that entire societies can become trapped inside collective illusions while believing themselves enlightened. Popularity becomes truth. Repetition becomes truth. Emotional reactions become truth. Over time, people lose the ability to distinguish reality from performance, manipulation, and carefully constructed appearances. Plato revealed a deeply unsettling possibility. Many people may live and die without ever truly seeing reality itself, spending their lives emotionally attached to shadows they mistake for truth because questioning those illusions feels more frightening than remaining trapped inside them forever. Habitual destiny. Habitual destiny was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher who believed that repeated actions slowly shape human character until habits eventually begin controlling a person's future more powerfully than conscious choices themselves. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people rarely notice when temporary behaviors become permanent identity. A single lie feels small at first. One moment of laziness seems harmless. One emotional outburst appears insignificant. But Aristotle understood that repetition quietly transforms actions into habits, and habits slowly transform into character. This becomes terrifying because habits operate invisibly. The mind adapts to repeated behavior until destructive patterns begin feeling natural, automatic, and emotionally comfortable. A person who repeatedly avoids responsibility slowly becomes incapable of discipline. Someone who constantly feeds anger trains their mind to react with hostility even when peace is possible. Fear, procrastination, jealousy, addiction, and emotional weakness all grow stronger through repetition until they begin shaping destiny itself. Aristotle believed human beings are not destroyed overnight. They are reshaped gradually through the small choices they repeat every day without serious reflection. This is what makes bad habits so psychologically dangerous. They rarely feel catastrophic while forming. Instead, they disguise themselves as comfort, convenience, temporary pleasure, or emotional relief. The darker part is that people often believe they are free while secretly being controlled by routines they no longer question. Entire lives become predictable because unconscious habits repeatedly produce the same outcomes: relationships, emotional reactions, and failures. What makes this philosophy especially disturbing is realizing that destiny may not arrive through fate or luck at all. It may quietly emerge from repeated behaviors so small and ordinary that most people never recognize they are slowly constructing their own future, one unconscious action at a time, every single day. Neglected higher self. Neglected higher self was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Plotinus, the ancient Neoplatonist philosopher who believed human beings possess a higher spiritual nature. Yet most people spend their lives trapped inside lower impulses, distractions, desires, and emotional noise because they never nourish the deeper part of themselves. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that the loudest voice inside a person is not always the wisest one. The lower self constantly demands attention through anger, lust, insecurity, pride, fear, envy, addiction, and endless craving. It reacts impulsively, seeks immediate pleasure, and obsesses over temporary validation. Because it is emotional and loud, many people mistake it for their true identity. Plotinus believed the higher self is very different. It is quieter, calmer, disciplined, reflective, and connected to deeper truth. But the frightening reality is that the higher self weakens when constantly ignored. Just like an abandoned muscle slowly deteriorates, the deeper part of the soul becomes faint when a person spends years consumed by distraction, emotional chaos, shallow pleasures, and constant stimulation. This creates a disturbing psychological imbalance. The more neglected the higher self becomes, the stronger the lower self appears. People begin feeling controlled by impulses they no longer understand. They become restless when alone, uncomfortable with silence, and emotionally dependent on distraction because the deeper inner world has become unfamiliar territory. The darkest part is that society often feeds the lower self continuously. Endless entertainment, comparison, status obsession, and emotional overstimulation keep people trapped at the surface level of existence. Very few individuals spend enough time in reflection, discipline, or solitude to strengthen the quieter part of themselves. And eventually, many people reach old age realizing they spent most of their life feeding desires while starving the deepest part of their soul completely. Restless attachment. Restless attachment was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Augustine, the ancient Christian philosopher and theologian who believed the human heart becomes emotionally tormented when it treats temporary things as though they were permanent and everlasting. One of the creepiest truths about human existence is how deeply people attach themselves to fragile things. They build their emotional stability around beauty, relationships, youth, money, status, possessions, or admiration, even though all of these things are temporary by nature. Augustine understood that the human heart desperately wants permanence in a world where almost nothing lasts forever. This creates a disturbing emotional conflict. People fall in love with moments they cannot keep. They become attached to identities that slowly fade with age. They depend emotionally on people who may eventually leave, change, or die. The mind tries to convince itself that temporary things can provide lasting peace, but reality always interrupts the illusion. What makes restless attachment psychologically terrifying is that the more deeply people cling to temporary things, the more fear begins controlling them. Love becomes fear of loss. Success becomes fear of failure. Beauty becomes fear of aging. Possession becomes fear of losing control. The heart slowly transforms into a prison of anxiety because attachment creates emotional dependence on things human beings cannot permanently protect. Augustine believed this restlessness explains why many people remain emotionally unsatisfied even after achieving what they once desperately wanted. Temporary pleasures can distract the mind briefly, but they cannot fully calm the deeper human hunger for lasting meaning and stability. And the darkest part is that many individuals spend their entire lives chasing emotional permanence through fragile things, never realizing that the harder they cling to what naturally fades, the more restless, fearful, and emotionally exhausted their hearts quietly become over time without them fully understanding why. Unstable fortune. Unstable fortune was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Boethius, the Roman philosopher who believed luck, success, wealth, and worldly happiness are dangerously unreliable because fortune gives people comfort only to remind them how easily everything can disappear. One of the creepiest truths about human life is how quickly people become emotionally attached to temporary stability. When life feels good, individuals begin believing the happiness will continue. They trust their success, relationships, health, reputation, and security as though these things belong to them permanently. But Boethius understood that fortune behaves unpredictably, raising people upward before suddenly pulling everything away without warning. This becomes psychologically terrifying because human beings build their identity around fragile external conditions. A person may feel powerful because of money, admired because of beauty, respected because of status, or emotionally safe because of relationships. Yet fortune can reverse everything in a single moment through illness, betrayal, failure, aging, or unexpected tragedy. What once felt permanent suddenly reveals itself as temporary. Boethius experienced this darkness personally after falling from political success into imprisonment and suffering. He realized fortune often seduces people into false emotional security. The more comfortable people become, the more devastating loss feels when life changes unexpectedly. Individuals begin trusting temporary conditions while forgetting how unstable existence truly is underneath the surface. The darker part is that fortune rarely warns people before leaving. Happiness quietly disappears while life continues moving forward without explanation. This creates deep emotional fear because people realize they never truly controlled the things they depended on for meaning and stability. Boethius revealed a deeply unsettling truth about existence. Fortune smiles not because it is loyal, but because temporary happiness becomes far more painful once human beings begin believing it will last forever, instead of recognizing how fragile worldly comfort truly is. Voluntary servitude. Voluntary servitude was a disturbing philosophical idea connected to Al-Farabi, the great Islamic philosopher who believed that a corrupt society can slowly condition people to desire the very systems, habits, and authorities that quietly enslave them psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually over time. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that people do not always resist control. Sometimes they become emotionally attached to it. A corrupt society rarely forces chains openly. Instead, it teaches individuals to love comfort more than freedom, approval more than truth, and pleasure more than wisdom. Over time, people begin participating willingly in the systems that weaken them. Al-Farabi understood that cities, cultures, and political systems shape human desire itself. If a society constantly rewards vanity, greed, distraction, and obedience, people slowly adapt until unhealthy behavior feels normal. Individuals begin measuring success through status, wealth, public image, or social validation without questioning whether those goals actually bring fulfillment or inner peace. This becomes psychologically terrifying because manipulation works best when it feels voluntary. People believe they are making independent choices while their desires are quietly shaped by entertainment, social pressure, fear, propaganda, and emotional conditioning. Entire populations can become addicted to distractions that keep them passive, dependent, and emotionally weak. The darker part is that corrupted societies often punish those who seek deeper truth. Independent thinkers become dangerous because they expose illusions others depend on emotionally. People may even attack those trying to free them because psychological chains can become familiar and comforting over time. What made Al-Farabi's philosophy so unsettling was the realization that human beings can be trained to protect the very forces destroying their freedom. And once people begin craving their own chains, oppression no longer requires violence to survive because it has already entered the mind itself permanently. Corrupted knowledge. Corrupted knowledge was a dark philosophical warning associated with Avicenna, the Persian philosopher and polymath who believed that knowledge alone does not make a person wise, because without inner purification, intellectual growth can quietly strengthen arrogance, pride, and emotional corruption instead of wisdom. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that intelligence can make people more dangerous when their character fails to mature alongside their knowledge. Many assume educated people automatically become humble, rational, and morally advanced, but Avicenna understood that knowledge can also feed the ego. The more some individuals learn, the more superior they begin feeling compared to others. This becomes psychologically disturbing because arrogance often disguises itself as brilliance. A knowledgeable person may speak eloquently, debate skillfully, and appear intellectually impressive while secretly becoming emotionally blind to their own flaws. They stop listening. They stop questioning themselves honestly. Over time, their identity becomes attached to being admired for intelligence rather than pursuing truth sincerely. Avicenna believed purification of the soul was necessary because the human ego contaminates everything it touches, including knowledge itself. Without humility, wisdom transforms into vanity. Learning becomes performance. Intellectual ability becomes a tool for domination, manipulation, and self-worship rather than understanding reality deeply. The darkest part is that society frequently rewards intellectual arrogance. Confident, highly educated individuals are often treated as unquestionable authorities, even when pride quietly controls their judgment. People become impressed by complexity and credentials while ignoring the emotional corruption hidden underneath. And this is why some of the most intelligent people in history have also caused immense destruction. Knowledge increases power, but power magnifies whatever already exists inside the soul. If insecurity, pride, or selfishness remain unpurified, intelligence simply gives those darker qualities sharper tools to influence, deceive, and control others more effectively over time. Intellectual idolatry. Intellectual idolatry was a dark philosophical warning associated with Al-Ghazali, the influential Persian philosopher and theologian who believed the human intellect becomes dangerous when people begin worshiping reason itself as the highest authority above humility, wisdom, and spiritual truth. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that intelligence can quietly transform into arrogance without a person even noticing. People often assume knowledge automatically makes someone wise, moral, or enlightened, but Al-Ghazali understood that the intellect can become an idol when individuals begin trusting their own reasoning so completely that they lose the ability to question themselves honestly. This becomes psychologically disturbing because the human mind enjoys feeling superior. Knowledge gives people a sense of control, certainty, and identity. Over time, intellectual ability can feed pride until a person secretly believes they are above ordinary people, beyond correction, or incapable of being deeply wrong. The intellect stops being a tool for discovering truth and becomes a weapon for protecting ego. What makes intellectual idolatry especially dangerous is how respectable it appears from the outside. Society praises intelligence, academic achievement, clever arguments, and persuasive speech, so intellectual arrogance often hides beneath admiration and social respect. A person may appear brilliant while becoming emotionally blind to their own pride, selfishness, or spiritual emptiness. Al-Ghazali believed the intellect has limits, and when humans worship their own reasoning completely, they become trapped inside the illusion that everything valuable can be controlled, explained, or mastered through logic alone. This creates emotional coldness, spiritual detachment, and hidden insecurity beneath intellectual confidence. And the darkest part is that some people become so addicted to appearing intelligent that they would rather defend their pride forever than admit uncertainty, humility, vulnerability, or the terrifying possibility that their intellect alone cannot save them from inner emptiness or spiritual blindness itself. Feared truth. Feared truth was a powerful philosophical idea associated with Averroes, the Muslim philosopher and scholar who believed truth remains true even when society rejects it, fears it, or punishes those who speak it openly. One of the creepiest things about human nature is how aggressively people resist truths that threaten their emotional comfort, identity, or sense of control. Human beings often claim to value honesty, wisdom, and knowledge. Yet history repeatedly shows that societies fear uncomfortable truths more than comforting illusions. Averroes understood that the crowd does not judge ideas based only on whether they are true, but on whether those ideas feel emotionally safe. This becomes psychologically disturbing because large groups can collectively reject reality while believing they are protecting morality, tradition, or stability. People often attack truths that expose hypocrisy, challenge authority, or force individuals to confront uncomfortable parts of themselves. Instead of examining the truth carefully, many react emotionally with anger, denial, ridicule, or hostility, because accepting certain realities would require painful change. Averroes believed fear can distort human judgment so deeply that falsehood becomes socially rewarded while truth becomes dangerous. Throughout history, thinkers, scientists, philosophers, and truth-tellers were often silenced, not because they were wrong, but because their ideas threatened existing power structures or emotional beliefs people depended on psychologically. The darker part is that crowds become more dangerous when fear spreads collectively. Once enough people reject a truth together, individuals begin conforming simply to avoid social punishment or isolation. Over time, entire societies can normalize denial while treating honesty as rebellion. Averroes revealed a chilling truth about human civilization. Reality does not change because people fear it. A lie repeated by millions remains a lie, while truth remains dangerous precisely because it survives even when the world desperately wants it erased completely. Spiritual ego. Spiritual ego was a deeply unsettling philosophical warning associated with Maimonides, the medieval Jewish philosopher who believed that many people claimed to defend truth, morality, or God while secretly protecting their own pride, identity, and emotional need to feel superior to others. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is how easily the ego disguises itself as righteousness. People often believe they are fighting for noble causes, sacred beliefs, or moral principles, yet beneath the surface, they may simply be defending their status, certainty, or personal image. The mind becomes dangerous when pride learns to wear the mask of virtue. Maimonides understood that religion and morality can become powerful hiding places for insecurity and ego. A person may appear deeply spiritual while secretly craving admiration, authority, or control. They may attack others not out of wisdom or compassion, but because disagreement feels like a threat to their identity itself. In these moments, defending truth becomes emotionally tied to defending the self. This becomes psychologically disturbing because people can commit cruelty while sincerely believing they are morally justified. History is filled with individuals who judged, shamed, punished, or even harmed others while convincing themselves they were serving a higher cause. The ego becomes especially dangerous when it believes it speaks on behalf of absolute truth. The darker part is that spiritual pride is difficult to recognize within oneself. The more morally superior a person feels, the less likely they are to question their own motives honestly. They begin loving the feeling of being righteous more than the difficult process of seeking truth humbly. What made Maimonides' philosophy so eerie was the realization that human beings may use even sacred beliefs to feed vanity, pride, and emotional insecurity, while convincing themselves they are serving something holy and pure instead. Disordered love. Disordered love was a chilling philosophical idea associated with Thomas Aquinas, the medieval philosopher and theologian who believed that evil does not always begin with hatred or cruelty, but often begins when human love becomes twisted, excessive, misplaced, or emotionally corrupted. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that people can destroy themselves and others through things they genuinely love. Love itself is not always pure or healthy. A person may love power too much and become tyrannical. They may love pleasure too much and become addicted. They may love approval too much and lose their identity completely. Even love for another person can become possessive, obsessive, controlling, or emotionally destructive. This is what Aquinas meant by disordered love. The problem is not necessarily the object itself, but the imbalance created when temporary things are loved more than truth, wisdom, morality, or inner stability. Human beings often become dangerous when their desires grow stronger than their discipline. The mind slowly begins justifying actions it once considered wrong because emotional attachment clouds judgment. The disturbing part is that disordered love rarely feels evil in the beginning. It feels passionate, it feels meaningful, it feels emotionally rewarding. People willingly sacrifice peace, morality, and self-control because intense attachment creates the illusion that desire itself must be followed. Over time, however, the very thing they loved begins controlling them psychologically. Aquinas understood that human beings are deeply shaped by what they prioritize emotionally. Whatever a person loves most eventually influences their choices, habits, identity, and behavior. When love becomes disordered, the soul itself becomes unstable. And this is why some of the darkest actions in human history were committed not by people who hated deeply, but by people whose attachments became so emotionally distorted that they could no longer recognize the damage they were causing anymore. Chosen darkness. Chosen darkness was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Duns Scotus, the medieval philosopher and theologian who believed human beings possessed the terrifying ability to knowingly choose harmful, immoral, or destructive actions even when they fully understand what is right. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that knowledge alone does not guarantee goodness. Many people assume evil exists because of ignorance, confusion, or lack of understanding, but Duns Scotus believed the human will has the freedom to reject truth even after recognizing it clearly. A person can understand honesty and still choose deception. They can recognize kindness and still choose cruelty. They can see the consequences of destruction and still move toward it willingly. This idea becomes psychologically terrifying because it reveals a dark split inside human beings. The mind may recognize light, morality, wisdom, or truth, while the will secretly desires power, pleasure, revenge, pride, or emotional satisfaction instead. People often know exactly what is damaging them, but continue choosing it because desire feels stronger than conscience in the moment. What makes chosen darkness especially disturbing is how ordinary it appears. People betray others despite understanding loyalty. They destroy relationships while knowing the pain it causes. They continue addictions while fully aware of the consequences. Human beings frequently act against their own understanding, almost as if part of the self is at war with another part internally. Duns Scotus believed this freedom makes humanity both powerful and dangerous because the will cannot simply be forced into goodness through logic alone. The heart must desire truth willingly, and the darkest part is realizing that some people are not lost because they cannot see the light, but because they consciously prefer the emotional rewards of darkness even while understanding exactly what they are becoming from within over time. Hidden confusion. Hidden confusion was a sharp philosophical idea associated with William of Ockham, the medieval philosopher who believed people often create unnecessary complexity to hide ignorance, uncertainty, or weak understanding behind impressive language and complicated explanations. One of the creepiest things about human intelligence is that complexity can easily create the illusion of wisdom. People naturally assume complicated ideas sound more intelligent because the mind associates difficulty with depth. But William of Ockham understood that confusion often disguises itself through excessive detail, endless explanations, and intellectual performance designed to appear profound instead of genuinely clear. This becomes psychologically disturbing because many individuals fear simplicity. A clear answer feels vulnerable because it can be questioned directly, while complicated language creates distance and authority. Politicians, leaders, manipulators, and even ordinary people sometimes hide behind complexity because confusion makes others less likely to challenge them. The more tangled the explanation becomes, the easier it is to avoid exposing weak reasoning underneath. Ockham believed the human mind also creates unnecessary complexity to avoid uncomfortable truths. People invent complicated excuses for destructive behavior because simple honesty feels emotionally threatening. A person may build elaborate justifications for greed, fear, or failure instead of admitting painful realities directly. Over time, individuals become trapped inside mental systems so complicated they no longer recognize the truth hidden beneath them. The darker part is that confusion spreads socially. Entire institutions, ideologies, and belief systems can become filled with meaningless complexity that people pretend to understand because admitting uncertainty feels humiliating. Crowds begin respecting obscurity while distrusting clarity. William of Ockham revealed a deeply unsettling truth about human thought. Complexity is not always a sign of intelligence. Sometimes the most confusing explanations exist because people are desperately trying to hide the fact that they do not truly understand reality themselves beneath the surface at all. Pragmatic power. Pragmatic power was a chilling philosophical idea associated with Machiavelli, the Renaissance political thinker who believed that power in the real world is often driven less by morality and more by effectiveness, survival, and the ability to produce results regardless of ethical appearance. One of the creepiest truths about human society is that people publicly praise morality while privately rewarding power. Leaders are often judged not by how virtuous they are, but by whether they succeed, dominate, protect interests, or maintain control. Machiavelli observed that in politics, business, war, and even relationships, results frequently matter more than noble intentions. This becomes psychologically disturbing because it exposes the hidden gap between what societies claim to value and what they actually reward. People may condemn manipulation, ruthlessness, or deception verbally, yet still admire those who use those methods successfully. Strength creates fascination. Success creates forgiveness. Power itself can reshape how morality is interpreted. Machiavelli understood that human beings are emotionally drawn toward winners, even when those winners achieved victory through morally questionable means. This creates a dangerous environment where appearances of virtue become more useful than genuine virtue itself. A leader does not always need to be moral. They often only need to appear moral while remaining effective behind the scenes. The darker part is realizing how fragile ethical principles become when fear, ambition, survival, or power enters the equation. Under pressure, many individuals abandon ideals they once claimed were sacred. Morality bends when people believe losing power would threaten their security, status, or survival. What makes Machiavelli's philosophy especially unsettling is the realization that power does not necessarily reward goodness. It often rewards strategy, perception, control, and effectiveness first. And throughout history, many people have willingly accepted immoral leaders simply because those leaders delivered results people emotionally desired most. Decorated folly. Decorated folly was a disturbing philosophical insight associated with Erasmus, the Dutch Renaissance philosopher and scholar who believed that many foolish ideas survive for generations, not because they are wise or true, but because society hides them beneath tradition, ceremony, and social respectability. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how easily people defend harmful or irrational customs simply because those customs are old. The moment something becomes traditional, many individuals stop questioning it. They assume age automatically equals wisdom. Entire societies continue practices that create suffering, hypocrisy, fear, or emotional damage simply because it has always been done this way. This becomes psychologically dangerous because tradition can make foolishness appear sacred. People may obey destructive rules, repeat outdated beliefs, or tolerate unhealthy systems while convincing themselves they are preserving culture, morality, or order. The fear of challenging tradition often becomes stronger than the desire to pursue truth honestly. Erasmus understood that human beings feel emotionally safer when following familiar patterns. Questioning old systems creates discomfort because it threatens identity, belonging, and social approval. Many people would rather defend inherited nonsense than risk isolation by thinking independently. Over time, entire communities become trapped inside rituals and beliefs nobody truly understands anymore. The darkest part is that decorated folly often disguises itself as virtue. Cruelty can be justified as discipline. Blind obedience can be praised as loyalty. Emotional repression can be called honor. society wraps foolishness in beautiful language until people stop recognizing the damage hidden underneath it. Erasmus believed the human mind is deeply vulnerable to collective illusion. Once enough people accept something publicly, others follow automatically to avoid rejection or conflict, and eventually, traditions that began through ignorance, fear, or power survive for centuries because people become more committed to preserving appearances than confronting uncomfortable truths about the systems shaping their lives every single day. Imperfect utopia. Imperfect utopia was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Thomas More, the English philosopher and author who believed that even the most perfectly designed society can never fully escape human weakness, corruption, and emotional imperfection. One of the creepiest truths about human civilization is that people constantly dream about creating a flawless world while ignoring the flawed nature of humanity itself. Societies imagine systems without greed, conflict, violence, jealousy, or suffering, believing better laws, better leaders, or better structures will finally solve human problems permanently. But Thomas More understood that no system can completely remove the darker impulses living inside human beings. This becomes psychologically disturbing because every attempt to create perfection eventually collides with human nature. Pride enters politics. Greed enters economics. Ego enters leadership. Fear enters social control. Even people who begin with good intentions can slowly become corrupted by power, recognition, or emotional insecurity. The system may appear perfect on paper while quietly decaying underneath because human beings carry their weaknesses into every structure they build. What makes imperfect utopia especially unsettling is how dangerous perfection itself can become. Once a society believes it has discovered the ideal system, disagreement begins looking like a threat rather than a normal part of human freedom. People who question the vision may be treated as enemies of progress, morality, or social harmony. In the pursuit of perfection, compassion often disappears first. Thomas More understood that humanity cannot simply engineer away emotional flaws, selfishness, or moral weakness through organization alone. Every civilization eventually reflects the imperfections of the people sustaining it. And the darkest part is that some of history's most oppressive systems began as dreams of building a better world, only to become frightening reminders that human weakness follows humanity everywhere it goes, no matter how perfect the vision initially appears. Corrupted knowledge. Corrupted knowledge was a dark philosophical warning associated with Francis Bacon, the English philosopher who believed knowledge becomes deeply dangerous when intelligence, science, and discovery are driven by ambition, power, or personal gain without moral conscience guiding them. One of the creepiest things about human intelligence is that knowledge itself is not automatically good. People often assume education, scientific advancement, and intellectual power naturally improve humanity. But Bacon understood that intelligence without ethics can become terrifyingly destructive. A brilliant mind with no conscience may become far more dangerous than an ignorant person because knowledge increases the ability to manipulate, dominate, and harm others efficiently. This becomes psychologically disturbing because ambition easily corrupts human motives. Individuals begin seeking knowledge not to understand truth or improve life, but to gain control, recognition, wealth, or influence. Over time, curiosity becomes weaponized, science becomes exploitation, innovation becomes surveillance, information becomes manipulation. The more intelligent people become, the more capable they are of justifying harmful actions while convincing themselves they are necessary or beneficial. Bacon understood that human beings often separate intelligence from morality. A person can be highly educated while emotionally empty, selfish, or cruel underneath. History repeatedly shows that some of humanity's greatest technological achievements were also connected to warfare, oppression, psychological control, and mass destruction. Knowledge expands power, but power without conscience rarely remains harmless for long. The darker part is that society frequently rewards ambitious intelligence even when it lacks humanity. Successful people are admired for results while the ethical cost of their actions is ignored. Crowds celebrate innovation before questioning its consequences. Francis Bacon revealed a chilling truth about civilization. The more knowledge humanity gains without developing equal moral responsibility, the more dangerous human beings become to themselves and to each other over time. Fearful chaos. Fearful chaos was a dark philosophical idea associated with Hobbes, the English philosopher who believed that without strong order and structure, human society can quickly collapse into fear, violence, suspicion, and survival-driven behavior, where insecurity becomes the true force controlling everyone. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is how quickly civilization can crack under pressure. People often believe morality, kindness, and cooperation are permanent qualities of society, but Hobbes believed much of human behavior depends heavily on stability and security. When order disappears, fear quietly takes control of the mind. This becomes psychologically terrifying because fear changes people rapidly. Under uncertainty, individuals become suspicious, defensive, aggressive, and emotionally unstable. Neighbors stop trusting neighbors. Survival begins overpowering empathy. Even good people can become cruel when they feel unsafe long enough. Hobbes understood that the human mind, when trapped in chaos, often prioritizes protection over morality. The darker part is that fear itself becomes a form of invisible government. People obey not because they are wise or compassionate, but because they are afraid of pain, loss, violence, rejection, or death. Entire societies can become emotionally ruled by panic without fully realizing it. Once fear spreads deeply enough, people may willingly surrender freedom, truth, and even morality just to feel secure again. Hobbes believed civilization exists partly to restrain the darker instincts hiding beneath human behavior. Laws, systems, and authority prevent society from descending into psychological warfare, where everyone becomes emotionally trapped in survival mode. Without structure, human life risks becoming dominated by paranoia, distrust, and constant insecurity. What makes this philosophy especially disturbing is realizing how thin the line between civilization and chaos may actually be. Beneath modern comfort and order, fear still waits quietly inside human nature, capable of reshaping society the moment stability begins collapsing around it completely. Isolating doubt. Isolating doubt was a haunting philosophical idea associated with René Descartes, the French philosopher who believed questioning assumptions could liberate the human mind from illusion, but also understood that endless doubt can slowly separate a person from certainty, trust, emotional connection, and inner peace. One of the creepiest truths about human consciousness is that once the mind begins questioning reality deeply, it becomes difficult to stop. Doubt starts as a tool for discovering truth, but over time it can grow into a permanent psychological condition. A person begins doubting beliefs, relationships, memories, intentions, society, and eventually even themselves. Descartes famously questioned everything he could possibly doubt in order to find something absolutely certain. He challenged the reliability of the senses, the external world, and human knowledge itself. While this method created intellectual freedom, it also revealed something emotionally disturbing. The deeper people question reality, the more isolated they may begin feeling inside their own mind. This becomes psychologically dangerous because certainty gives human beings emotional stability. Most people rely on assumptions to function comfortably. They trust appearances, relationships, routines, and social structures because constant questioning would feel mentally exhausting. But doubt quietly dissolves that comfort. Once a person sees how fragile human certainty truly is, ordinary life can start feeling strangely unreal. The darkest part is that doubt can isolate people emotionally from others. Someone who constantly questions motives, meanings, and truths may struggle to feel connected or secure. Relationships weaken when trust disappears. Inner peace fades when the mind endlessly searches for certainty it may never fully find. Descartes understood that doubt is powerful because it destroys illusion, but destruction alone cannot nourish the soul. And eventually, some people become trapped in endless skepticism, unable to fully trust the world, other people, or even the reality of their own thoughts anymore. Invisible control. Invisible control was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Spinoza, the Dutch philosopher who believed that most people only imagine they are free because they remain unaware of the hidden forces controlling their thoughts, emotions, desires, and decisions. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people often mistake unconscious influence for personal choice. Individuals believe they freely choose their beliefs, relationships, ambitions, fears, and desires. Yet Spinoza argued that much of human behavior is shaped by forces operating beneath awareness. Childhood conditioning, emotional trauma, social pressure, biological impulses, fear, pride, and unconscious habits quietly guide human actions while people continue believing they are fully in control. This becomes psychologically terrifying because the illusion of freedom feels extremely convincing. A person may passionately defend opinions they never truly questioned. They may chase goals society implanted into them long before they developed self-awareness. Even emotional reactions such as anger, jealousy, attraction, or hatred can emerge automatically from hidden internal causes people barely understand. What makes invisible control especially disturbing is that the mind naturally protects its illusion of independence. People dislike believing they are influenced because freedom forms a major part of human identity. As a result, individuals often rationalize their behavior afterward instead of honestly examining what truly drives them internally. Spinoza believed genuine freedom only begins when people deeply understand the forces shaping their thoughts and emotions. Without self-awareness, human beings become trapped inside patterns they mistake for individuality. The mind becomes a puppet while imagining itself the puppeteer. And the darkest part is realizing that many people may live their entire lives believing they are freely choosing their path while unconsciously obeying fears, desires, conditioning, and emotional programming they never fully recognized or escaped from within themselves at all. Invisible conditioning. Invisible conditioning was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with John Locke, the English philosopher who believed the human mind is shaped gradually through experience, environment, education, and social influence long before a person becomes aware of what is happening internally. One of the creepiest things about human psychology is how early conditioning begins. People like to believe their thoughts, values, desires, and beliefs are freely chosen, but Locke understood that much of human identity is quietly programmed through repeated experiences from childhood onward. Family, culture, religion, education, media, and social expectations slowly shape the mind before individuals develop the ability to critically question what they are absorbing. This becomes psychologically disturbing because most conditioning feels natural instead of forced. A child grows into an adult believing certain fears, habits, and beliefs are simply part of who they are without realizing how deeply external influence constructed them. People inherit emotional reactions, political beliefs, insecurities, prejudices, ambitions, and definitions of success long before they consciously examine them. Over time, individuals defend these ideas passionately because they mistake conditioning for identity. Locke understood that the human mind adapts to its environment automatically in order to survive socially. People unconsciously imitate behaviors, absorb values, and follow emotional patterns rewarded by the groups around them. This means entire societies can shape human thinking without individuals noticing the process happening inside their own consciousness. The darker part is that manipulation becomes most effective when it feels invisible. Governments, institutions, advertisers, ideologies, and social systems often influence behavior gradually through repetition and emotional reinforcement instead of direct force. People believe they are making independent choices while unknowingly reacting to years of psychological conditioning. John Locke revealed a chilling truth about human identity. By the time many people begin questioning who they truly are, large parts of their mind may already have been shaped by forces they never consciously chose themselves. Necessary suffering. Necessary suffering was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Leibniz, the German philosopher who argued that even if this were the best possible version of existence, it would still contain immense pain, tragedy, cruelty, and suffering woven deeply into the structure of life itself. One of the creepiest truths about reality is that suffering does not always disappear simply because life contains beauty, meaning, or progress. Human beings naturally want to believe pain is temporary, accidental, or avoidable if people become wise enough. But Leibniz confronted a far darker possibility. Suffering may not be a flaw in existence, but an unavoidable part of it. This becomes psychologically disturbing because the human mind desperately searches for fairness in the world. People want tragedy to have clear reasons. They want pain to feel proportional, meaningful, or morally justified. Yet reality often delivers illness, loss, betrayal, disaster, and emotional devastation without warning or fairness. Innocent people suffer. Good intentions fail. Love still ends in grief. Leibniz believed that even within the most balanced and meaningful reality possible, unbearable pain could still exist because existence itself may require tension, limitation, and imperfection. This idea becomes terrifying because it removes the comforting fantasy that humanity can completely eliminate suffering forever. The darker part is realizing how fragile happiness truly is. Every joyful experience quietly carries the possibility of future loss. Every relationship contains the shadow of separation. Every human life moves slowly toward aging, uncertainty, and death, no matter how beautiful moments may seem temporarily. What makes this philosophy especially unsettling is the realization that suffering may not always be evidence that reality is broken. Sometimes pain exists simply because existence itself contains forces beyond human emotional preference, and no amount of intelligence, progress, or morality may ever fully remove that darkness from life permanently for anyone. Fragile reality. Fragile reality was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with George Berkeley, the Irish philosopher who believed that human beings may not experience reality directly at all, but instead experience perceptions shaped entirely through the mind itself. One of the creepiest truths about existence is how little people truly know about the world surrounding them. Most individuals assume reality is fixed, solid, and completely independent of perception. They trust their senses automatically. They believe what they see, hear, and touch must represent objective truth. But Berkeley challenged this comforting assumption by suggesting that reality may depend far more on perception than human pride is willing to accept. This becomes psychologically disturbing because it weakens the feeling of certainty people rely on every day. Human beings like believing the world exists exactly as they experience it, yet perception itself is fragile, limited, and easily manipulated. Memories change over time. Emotions distort interpretation. Fear alters what people notice. Two individuals can experience the same event and leave with completely different versions of reality inside their minds. Berkeley understood that human consciousness stands between people and the external world like a filter they can never fully escape. Everything a person experiences passes through perception first. This creates an uncomfortable realization that much of what feels unquestionably real may actually be shaped by interpretation, expectation, emotion, and mental limitation. The darkest part is how vulnerable perception makes human beings to illusion and manipulation. People can be deceived not only by others, but by their own minds. Entire beliefs, fears, and identities can form around distorted interpretations of reality that feel completely true emotionally. And this is why reality itself can begin feeling strangely unstable once someone understands how deeply perception controls human experience. The mind does not simply observe the world. In many ways, it quietly constructs the version of reality people believe they are living inside every single day. Emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with David Hume, the Scottish philosopher who believed human beings are far less rational than they imagine, because reason often serves emotions, desires, and impulses instead of truly controlling them. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that people love believing they are logical creatures while secretly being driven by feelings they barely understand. Most individuals think their decisions come from careful reasoning, but Hume argued that emotions usually decide first, and reason simply arrives afterward to justify the choice. The mind creates explanations that sound rational, while hidden desires quietly remain in control underneath. This becomes psychologically disturbing because human beings trust their reasoning far more than they should. A person may believe they hate someone for logical reasons when the real source is jealousy or wounded pride. They may defend political beliefs with endless arguments while secretly protecting emotional identity and fear. Even moral judgments are often shaped more by emotional reaction than objective truth. What makes emotional reasoning especially dangerous is how convincing it feels internally. People rarely experience themselves as irrational. Instead, the mind automatically constructs narratives that protect self-image and emotional comfort. Reason becomes a skilled lawyer defending the impulses of the heart rather than an independent judge searching honestly for truth. Hume believed this explains why intelligent people can passionately defend completely opposite beliefs using equally persuasive logic. The intellect often serves emotion like a loyal servant serving a hidden master. Human beings then mistake polished reasoning for genuine objectivity, and the darkest part is realizing that many thoughts people proudly call independent reasoning may simply be emotional instincts wearing intellectual clothing, quietly shaping beliefs, decisions, relationships, and entire worldviews, while the individual continues believing their mind is fully in control of itself at all times without question or awareness. Inner corruption. Inner corruption was a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the French philosopher who believed civilization often improves human appearance, manners, and social structure while quietly damaging the natural honesty and emotional purity inside people. One of the creepiest things about civilization is that it can make people look refined while slowly corrupting their inner character. Society teaches individuals how to behave, speak politely, dress properly, and gain social approval. But Rousseau believed this process often pushes people further away from their authentic selves. Instead of living naturally, human beings begin performing roles designed to satisfy the expectations of others. This becomes psychologically disturbing because corruption rarely feels evil while it is happening. People gradually become obsessed with status, comparison, reputation, wealth, and public image because civilization rewards appearances more than sincerity. A person learns to hide emotions, suppress honesty, and manipulate social behavior in order to survive socially. Over time, individuals stop asking who they truly are and begin focusing entirely on how they are perceived. Rousseau understood that modern society creates emotional alienation. The more civilized people become outwardly, the more disconnected they may feel internally. Individuals smile while feeling empty. They follow social rules while secretly battling envy, insecurity, loneliness, and emotional exhaustion. Civilization teaches people to compete constantly, making self-worth dependent on admiration and external validation. The darker part is that many people never realize this transformation is happening. They mistake social success for genuine happiness, while their inner peace slowly disappears. Entire societies can become emotionally artificial, filled with polished individuals hiding quiet despair beneath controlled behavior and respectable appearances. Rousseau revealed a chilling truth about civilization. The process that makes humans appear more advanced outwardly may also be the very thing quietly damaging their emotional authenticity, inner freedom, and natural humanity from within over time. Sacred cruelty. Sacred cruelty was a deeply disturbing philosophical warning associated with Voltaire, the French Enlightenment philosopher who believed that fanaticism has the terrifying power to make ordinary people commit cruelty while sincerely believing they are morally righteous, spiritually pure, or serving a sacred cause. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that people become most dangerous when they stop seeing themselves as dangerous. Fanaticism convinces individuals that their beliefs are so unquestionably correct that anyone who disagrees becomes an enemy, a threat, or even something less than human. Once this happens, empathy begins collapsing silently inside the mind. Voltaire understood that fanaticism rarely appears evil at first. It often disguises itself as devotion, patriotism, moral certainty, justice, or spiritual passion. People become emotionally intoxicated by the feeling of absolute certainty because doubt disappears and identity suddenly feels powerful, meaningful, and protected. This psychological state becomes terrifying because it allows cruelty to feel justified instead of shameful. The darker part is that fanaticism removes inner hesitation. A person no longer asks, "Is this wrong?" They only ask, "Does this serve the cause?" History repeatedly shows ordinary individuals humiliating, persecuting, imprisoning, or killing others while believing they are defending truth, morality, religion, or society itself. The mind becomes capable of horrifying behavior once moral certainty replaces human compassion. Voltaire believed the most frightening cruelty often comes not from hatred alone, but from people convinced they are spiritually or morally superior. Fanaticism transforms violence into virtue and intolerance into duty. What makes this philosophy especially unsettling is realizing how easily human beings can become emotionally addicted to certainty itself. Once a person believes their cause is unquestionably sacred, almost any act can begin feeling justified, necessary, and even holy inside their own conscience completely. Human degradation. Human degradation was a dark moral warning associated with Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher who believed that people lose part of their own humanity the moment they begin treating other human beings merely as tools for personal gain, pleasure, control, or convenience. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how easily people reduce others into objects without realizing what it does to their own soul. A person may use someone emotionally for validation, financially for profit, sexually for pleasure, socially for status, or psychologically for control, while convincing themselves it is normal. Over time, relationships stop becoming human connections and start becoming transactions. Kant believed every human being possesses inherent dignity that should never be exploited or manipulated. But the disturbing reality is that selfish desire often blinds people to this principle completely. The more someone becomes obsessed with power, ego, pleasure, or ambition, the easier it becomes for them to ignore the humanity of others. People slowly stop seeing individuals as living minds with fears, emotions, and inner worlds. They only see usefulness. This becomes psychologically dangerous because dehumanizing others quietly deforms the person doing it. Someone who constantly manipulates, exploits, or uses people eventually weakens their own capacity for empathy, respect, and moral awareness. The mind adapts to treating human beings as objects, and eventually even genuine intimacy begins feeling unnatural or unnecessary. The darkest part is that society often rewards this behavior. Ruthless individuals may gain wealth, influence, or admiration while emotionally disconnecting from human compassion entirely. Success can hide inner moral decay so effectively that people mistake exploitation for intelligence or strength. Kant understood that every act of using another person for selfish ends damages more than the victim alone. It slowly corrupts the character of the one committing the act until they become emotionally incapable of seeing humanity clearly anymore. Conflict-driven progress. Conflict-driven progress was a dark philosophical idea associated with Hegel, the German philosopher who believed human history does not move forward through peace, comfort, or stability, but through tension, struggle, opposition, and destructive conflict between competing forces. One of the creepiest truths about civilization is that major change often emerges from suffering rather than harmony. Human beings naturally crave comfort, safety, and emotional stability, yet Hegel believed societies rarely evolve while people remain comfortable. Progress usually appears only after crises, wars, revolutions, collapse, or painful confrontation force individuals and civilizations to transform. This becomes psychologically disturbing because it suggests conflict is not simply an accident of history, but one of its driving engines. Old systems resist change until pressure becomes unbearable. Powerful institutions refuse reform until instability threatens survival. Individuals also behave this way internally. Many people only grow emotionally after heartbreak, failure, humiliation, loss, or deep suffering forces them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. What makes conflict-driven progress especially unsettling is how destruction and advancement often exist side by side. Wars produce innovation. Economic collapse reshapes societies. Personal suffering creates wisdom. Human beings repeatedly rebuild themselves through pain instead of prevention. History moves like a violent struggle between opposing forces, constantly destroying older realities to create newer ones. Hegel believed every era contains internal contradictions that eventually erupt into conflict, reshaping civilization completely. Stability itself quietly carries the seeds of future disruption, because unresolved tensions continue growing beneath the surface until they can no longer remain hidden. And the darkest part is realizing that many of humanity's greatest transformations were born from fear, violence, suffering, and instability, forcing people to question whether progress itself may always require some form of destruction before genuine change becomes possible at all within human civilization and history. Endless desire. Endless desire was a deeply disturbing philosophical idea associated with Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher who believed human suffering never truly ends because desire constantly creates new cravings, new dissatisfaction, and new emotional emptiness, no matter how much people achieve or possess. One of the creepiest things about human nature is that satisfaction rarely lasts. People spend years chasing love, success, money, recognition, pleasure, or achievement, believing fulfillment waits on the other side of accomplishment. But Schopenhauer understood that the moment one desire is satisfied, another immediately takes its place. The human mind behaves like a machine programmed to keep wanting more endlessly. This becomes psychologically terrifying because desire creates the illusion that happiness is always slightly ahead in the future. A person believes life will finally feel complete after achieving a goal, entering a relationship, gaining wealth, or reaching social success. Yet once the excitement fades, the emptiness quietly returns. The mind quickly adapts to what it once desperately wanted, making satisfaction temporary and dissatisfaction permanent. Schopenhauer believed this endless cycle traps human beings in constant emotional restlessness. People become exhausted chasing things they imagine will save them from inner emptiness while unknowingly feeding the very machine causing their suffering. Desire creates anxiety before achievement, fear during possession, and emptiness after fulfillment. Even pleasure becomes unstable because the fear of losing it begins almost immediately. The darker part is that society encourages this endless craving constantly. Advertisements, social status, ambition, and comparison convince people they are incomplete without more success, beauty, attention, or possessions. Entire lives become consumed by pursuit without reflection. Schopenhauer revealed a chilling truth about existence. Many people never actually live peacefully because desire keeps their minds permanently trapped between craving what they do not have and fearing the loss of what they already gained over time. Collective escape. Collective escape was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who believed that crowds often protect individuals from confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves, existence, responsibility, and the frightening reality of being emotionally alone in their choices. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is how much safety people find in belonging to groups. Crowds provide emotional protection because they reduce the pressure of thinking independently. When surrounded by others who share the same beliefs, behaviors, opinions, or distractions, individuals can avoid confronting deeper questions about whether their lives are truly meaningful, authentic, or morally honest. Kierkegaard understood that the crowd can become a psychological hiding place. People often lose themselves inside public opinion, trends, ideologies, religions, or social movements because individuality feels terrifying. Thinking independently creates anxiety because it forces a person to face uncertainty, doubt, and personal responsibility without emotional support from the group. This becomes disturbing because the crowd can slowly numb self-awareness. Individuals begin repeating ideas they never examined deeply. They follow lifestyles they never consciously chose. They accept beliefs because disagreement risks rejection or isolation. Over time, people may spend entire lives hiding inside collective identity while avoiding the difficult work of understanding who they truly are. The darker part is that crowds can make falsehood feel emotionally comforting simply because many people believe it together. The human mind often mistakes popularity for truth because agreement creates psychological relief. But Kierkegaard believed truth is often discovered in solitude, not conformity. What makes this philosophy especially eerie is realizing how many people secretly fear silence, introspection, and independent thought itself. The crowd becomes addictive because it protects individuals from confronting uncomfortable realities about mortality, emptiness, fear, and personal responsibility that emerge when external noise finally disappears completely from around them. Fear disguised as virtue. Fear disguised as virtue was a dark philosophical insight associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who believed many behaviors praised as moral or virtuous are often rooted not in genuine goodness, but in fear, weakness, insecurity, and the need for social approval. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that people frequently hide fear beneath respectable language. Someone may call themselves humble when they are actually afraid of standing out. Another person may appear kind because they fear rejection or conflict. Obedience may look moral while secretly coming from cowardice. Even selflessness can sometimes hide fear of judgment, loneliness, or criticism. Nietzsche believed society often rewards behaviors that keep people controlled, passive, and emotionally dependent. Over time, individuals begin glorifying traits that protect them from risk instead of helping them grow stronger. Fear becomes decorated with noble names until people stop recognizing it for what it truly is. Weakness begins presenting itself as morality. This becomes psychologically disturbing because many people genuinely believe their disguises. The human mind constantly rewrites uncomfortable motives into morally acceptable stories. A person may avoid chasing their dreams while calling it being realistic. They may suppress anger and call it peace, even while resentment quietly poisons them internally for years. The darkest part is that entire societies can normalize fearful behavior while condemning strength, independence, ambition, or emotional honesty. People who challenge social expectations are often labeled dangerous, selfish, or arrogant because their confidence exposes the hidden insecurities of others. Nietzsche understood that fear is one of the strongest hidden forces shaping human morality. Many virtues praised publicly may not come from courage or wisdom at all, but from emotional survival strategies designed to protect fragile people from discomfort, uncertainty, rejection, failure, or the terrifying responsibility of fully becoming themselves in life. Invisible chains. Invisible chains were a disturbing philosophical idea associated with Karl Marx, the German philosopher and economist who believed many people unknowingly accept systems of control, inequality, and exploitation because they are taught to see them as normal, natural, and unavoidable parts of life. One of the creepiest truths about human society is how easily people adapt to conditions that quietly limit their freedom. Individuals are often born into social systems, economic structures, and cultural expectations so deeply rooted that questioning them feels strange or even dangerous. Marx believed this creates invisible chains, where people obey systems that harm them while believing those systems simply reflect the natural order of reality. This becomes psychologically terrifying because control works most effectively when it feels ordinary. A person may spend their entire life exhausted, financially trapped, emotionally dependent, or socially restricted without fully recognizing how much of their behavior is shaped by systems designed long before they were born. People begin defending the very structures that keep them powerless because familiarity creates emotional comfort. What makes invisible chains especially disturbing is that they rarely appear as obvious oppression. They hide inside work culture, class divisions, social expectations, and economic survival. Individuals are taught what success should look like, what dreams are acceptable, and how much suffering should be tolerated. Over time, obedience starts feeling like responsibility, while questioning the system starts looking irresponsible or unrealistic. Marx believed people often mistake conditioning for freedom because they cannot easily imagine alternatives beyond the reality surrounding them daily. The mind adapts to limitation until limitation feels normal, and the darkest part is realizing that Entire societies can quietly normalize emotional exhaustion, inequality, and exploitation for generations, while millions continue believing their suffering is simply the way life was always meant to be, rather than recognizing the invisible chains shaping their existence every single day. Economic morality. Economic morality was a dark philosophical idea associated with Friedrich Engels, the German philosopher and social theorist who believed human morality is often shaped less by religion or noble ideals and more by the economic systems people are forced to survive within every day. One of the creepiest things about human society is how strongly money and survival shape behavior without people fully realizing it. Most individuals believe morality comes from personal values, religion, or conscience. But Engels argued that economic conditions quietly influence how people think, behave, and judge right from wrong. A society built around competition, scarcity, and profit slowly trains people to value success, productivity, and personal gain above empathy, honesty, or humanity. This becomes psychologically disturbing because people often adapt morally to survive inside systems they privately dislike. A person may become emotionally cold because kindness threatens financial survival. Others justify exploitation because the system rewards profit over compassion. Over time, individuals begin normalizing behaviors they once considered cruel simply because those behaviors become economically useful or socially rewarded. Engels understood that economic pressure changes relationships, identity, and even emotional values. People start measuring human worth through income, status, and productivity. Friendships become transactional. Families become financially strained. Entire societies slowly lose emotional depth because survival anxiety dominates everyday life. Morality begins shifting according to what benefits the system rather than what benefits human well-being. The darker part is that many people believe they are making completely free moral choices while invisible economic forces quietly shape their decisions from underneath. Entire generations can inherit values designed by systems built long before they were born. Engels revealed a chilling truth about civilization. Sermons may teach morality publicly, but economic systems often shape human behavior far more powerfully because survival instinct influences people long before philosophical ideals ever reach their conscience emotionally or psychologically. Social tyranny. Social tyranny was a disturbing philosophical warning associated with Mill, the English philosopher who believed that oppression does not always come from kings, dictators, or governments. Sometimes society itself becomes the tyrant through public opinion, social pressure, and the collective punishment of anyone who refuses to conform. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how strongly people fear rejection from the group. Most individuals want acceptance, approval, and emotional belonging because isolation feels psychologically painful. This gives society enormous invisible power. A person may technically be free under the law while still feeling trapped by the fear of ridicule, exclusion, humiliation, or cancellation from others around them. Mill understood that social pressure can become more suffocating than political control because it enters the mind itself. People begin censoring thoughts before speaking. They hide opinions to avoid conflict. They shape their personalities around what feels socially safe rather than what feels honest or meaningful. Over time, conformity becomes automatic and individuality slowly weakens. This becomes especially disturbing because social tyranny often disguises itself as morality or progress. Crowds convince themselves they are protecting society while emotionally punishing anyone viewed as strange, unpopular, controversial, or different. Public shame becomes a weapon used to force obedience without physical violence. The darker part is that people frequently participate in this cruelty without recognizing it. Individuals join collective outrage because belonging to the majority feels emotionally safer than questioning it. Fear of becoming the next target keeps many people silent even when they privately disagree. What made Mill's philosophy so unsettling was the realization that freedom can disappear gradually even inside democratic societies. A culture may appear open and civilized while quietly training people to fear independent thought, emotional honesty, and personal individuality more than actual oppression itself from any ruler. Pleasure without meaning. Pleasure without meaning was a dark philosophical warning associated with Jeremy Bentham, the English philosopher who believed human beings naturally seek pleasure and avoid pain, yet also revealed the disturbing danger of building an entire life around pleasure alone. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how easily people can become trapped chasing comfort, stimulation, and temporary satisfaction while slowly losing depth, purpose, and self-respect. Pleasure feels good immediately, which makes it psychologically seductive. Food, entertainment, sex, attention, money, distraction, and endless stimulation can temporarily numb pain and create emotional relief. But Bentham's ideas exposed an uncomfortable reality. Pleasure alone cannot sustain human dignity for long. This becomes dangerous because the human mind adapts quickly to pleasure. What once felt exciting eventually becomes normal, forcing people to seek stronger stimulation just to feel satisfied again. Over time, individuals may begin organizing their entire existence around avoiding discomfort and maximizing pleasure, even if it weakens their discipline, identity, and emotional stability. The disturbing part is that pleasure can quietly erase meaning when it becomes the highest goal. People may abandon responsibility for convenience, sacrifice integrity for gratification, or lose their sense of purpose while endlessly chasing entertainment and comfort. A life centered only around pleasure often creates emptiness beneath the surface because human beings secretly need struggle, growth, responsibility, and meaning to feel whole psychologically. Bentham understood that pleasure matters, but pleasure without higher principles can reduce human life into instinctive consumption. When dignity disappears, people begin living only for emotional stimulation rather than truth, character, or inner development. And this is why many individuals surrounded by comfort still feel deeply empty inside. Their desires remain temporarily satisfied, but their deeper humanity slowly starves beneath endless distraction, indulgence, and the constant pursuit of feeling good at any cost over time. Spiritual imitation. Spiritual imitation was a haunting philosophical warning associated with Ralph Waldo Emerson, the American philosopher and writer who believed that constantly copying others slowly destroys individuality, authenticity, and the deeper essence of the human spirit. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is how easily people abandon themselves in order to be accepted. From childhood, individuals are pressured to imitate the beliefs, behaviors, ambitions, appearances, and lifestyles that society rewards. Emerson believed this constant imitation creates a hidden form of spiritual death because people gradually lose contact with their original thoughts, instincts, and identity. This becomes psychologically disturbing because imitation rarely feels dangerous at first. It feels safe. It feels socially rewarding. People imitate trends to avoid rejection, imitate opinions to fit into groups, and imitate success because uncertainty feels terrifying. Over time, individuals stop asking what they genuinely believe or desire. They become reflections of social expectations rather than independent human beings. What makes spiritual imitation especially unsettling is how invisible the transformation becomes. A person may appear successful, admired, and socially accepted while internally feeling disconnected, numb, or strangely empty. Their life starts feeling scripted because much of their personality was built from borrowed ideas instead of authentic self-discovery. Even emotions can become performative when individuals unconsciously model themselves after others constantly. Emerson believed every human being possesses a unique inner voice, but imitation slowly silences it beneath layers of conformity and external influence. The soul weakens when a person spends years performing identities designed for approval rather than truth. And the darkest part is realizing that many people never truly discover who they are because they spend their entire lives copying the desires, fears, ambitions, and personalities of others, slowly losing themselves while believing they are successfully becoming what society expects them to be instead. Comfortable emptiness. Comfortable emptiness was a haunting philosophical idea associated with Henry David Thoreau, the American philosopher and writer who believed a person can live safely, peacefully, and comfortably while still wasting their existence without ever truly living deeply or meaningfully. One of the creepiest things about modern life is that comfort can quietly numb people into spiritual sleep. Most human beings spend their lives chasing security, routine, convenience, and stability because discomfort feels dangerous. But Thoreau understood that a life free from struggle is not automatically a life filled with meaning. A person can avoid risks, follow routines, earn money, and maintain comfort for decades while secretly feeling emotionally empty underneath. This becomes psychologically disturbing because wasted lives rarely look tragic from the outside. People wake up, go to work, follow habits, entertain themselves, and repeat the same emotional cycles until years quietly disappear. Everything appears stable and normal, yet internally, many individuals feel disconnected from purpose, curiosity, and genuine aliveness. They survive comfortably without ever confronting who they truly are or what they genuinely value. Thoreau believed society encourages this emotional numbness by teaching people to prioritize safety over depth. Individuals become trapped inside routines designed to maintain comfort rather than awaken the soul. Fear of failure, judgment, uncertainty, and discomfort slowly prevents people from exploring meaningful experiences, creativity, truth, or personal freedom. The darker part is that comfort makes wasted time feel invisible. Extreme suffering forces reflection, but comfort often hides existential emptiness beneath distraction and routine. People convince themselves they are living simply because they are functioning. Thoreau revealed a chilling truth about human existence. Many people do not lose their lives through catastrophe or tragedy, but through years of quiet comfort that slowly drains courage, passion, self-discovery, and emotional depth while making emptiness feel normal and safe over time. Automatic belief. Automatic belief was a deeply unsettling philosophical idea associated with Peirce, the American philosopher who believed that many human beliefs are not formed through deep reasoning or objective truth, but through repeated habits, emotional routines, and patterns of behavior people unconsciously follow over time. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people often believe things simply because they have practiced believing them long enough. A belief can begin as a small emotional reaction, a repeated statement, a family tradition, or a social influence, then slowly harden into something that feels unquestionably true. Over time, repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates psychological comfort. Peirce understood that the mind dislikes uncertainty. Human beings naturally seek stable patterns that reduce confusion and emotional tension. Once a belief becomes tied to daily behavior, identity, or social belonging, people stop examining it critically. They no longer ask whether something is true. They simply continue acting it out automatically because it feels normal. This becomes disturbing because entire lives can be shaped by beliefs people never consciously chose. Individuals repeat destructive relationship patterns, political loyalties, fears, prejudices, or self-defeating thoughts, simply because those mental habits became emotionally familiar. Even false ideas can feel deeply real once the mind practices them repeatedly enough. The darker part is realizing how difficult it becomes to break automatic beliefs once they fuse with routine and identity. Contradicting evidence often feels emotionally threatening because changing a belief can feel like changing the self. People defend habits of thought not always because they are rational, but because abandoning them creates psychological discomfort and instability. What made Peirce's philosophy especially eerie was the realization that much of human certainty may not come from truth itself. It may come from repeated mental behavior becoming so familiar that the mind mistakes habit for reality completely over time.